The Nutt House. By Michael. Front matter. To the perpetually bewildered, the delightfully deranged, and the charmingly chaotic residents of the human psyche, may your escape routes always be meticulously planned, your red herrings flawlessly deployed, and your alibis airtight. This one's for you. Specifically, for Silas, whose audacity in the face of institutional monotony remains a masterclass in strategic rebellion. I've always admired those who dare to unravel the carefully constructed threads of normalcy, even if it means embracing the exquisitely unsettling. This book, however, is not a how-to manual. Do not attempt to replicate any of Silas's actions. He had a unique set of skills, a highly questionable moral compass, and a surprisingly effective method for manipulating the profoundly inept. Attempting to replicate his methodology would be not only ill-advised, but likely to result in a significantly longer stay in an institution than anticipated, one considerably less charitable. Believe me, the staff at the average state-run facility has less patience than a rabid badger deprived of its honey. Furthermore, this dedication extends to those unsung heroes who tirelessly navigate the labyrinthine corridors of bureaucratic madness, the brave souls who dedicate their lives to wresting sanity from the jaws of chaos. I acknowledge the inherent absurdity of such a task and salute you for your unwavering commitment, even as you struggle with your sanity. This book also belongs to those individuals who believe it's the subtle art of chaos that prevents the world from becoming utterly mundane, and let us never forget that such belief systems can sometimes prove quite lucrative, especially for a resourceful sociopath. So raise a glass of something appropriately intoxicating to Silas, the embodiment of creative destruction, and to all the delightfully unpredictable souls who have inspired these pages. May your quirks, your eccentricities, and your brilliant acts of defiance continue to enrich and challenge the tedium of normalcy. The world needs more well-crafted mayhem. Just not the kind that lands you in prison. Or, the Nutt House. That's a different kind of hell altogether. Chapter 1. The Cage. The rusted gates of the Nutt House groaned like a dying beast, their iron teeth perpetually snarling at the swirling mist that perpetually clung to the Gothic structure. Ivy, thick as pythons, snaked its way across crumbling brickwork, obscuring gargoyles that seemed to leer down from their perches, judging the pathetic souls within. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth, stale disinfectant, and something else. Something indefinably acrid, like the lingering smell of burnt sugar and fear. This was not a place for the faint of heart, nor the sane of mind. Inside, the Nutt House was a chaotic symphony of madness. A cacophony of screams, whispers, and the rhythmic thumping of unseen feet echoed through the long, dimly lit corridors. Patients, a motley crew of societal rejects and the genuinely unhinged, shuffled through the halls like ghosts, their eyes glazed over, their movements jerky and unpredictable. One man, clad in a tattered bathrobe, chanted incessantly about the impending apocalypse, his voice a monotonous drone that somehow managed to cut through the other noises. A woman with eyes like chipped porcelain sat hunched in a corner, muttering to herself in a language that sounded disturbingly like reverse-engineered Pig Latin. Another paced restlessly, his hands stained crimson, muttering about the delicious irony of self-harm. And then there was Silas. He sat alone in a windowless room, his back ramrod straight, a stark contrast to the general state of disarray. His fingers meticulously traced patterns on a chipped mug, his gaze distant, almost serene. He was a man of calculated calm in a hurricane of hysteria, a predator in a flock of wounded birds. His eyes, though, held a flicker of something else, a cold, calculating intelligence that hinted at the simmering chaos beneath the surface. He was a master of deception, a puppeteer whose strings controlled the marionettes of madness around him. Heard they're serving gruel again tonight, a voice rasped from the doorway. It belonged to Bartholomew, a mountain of a man whose obsession with collecting spoons was only surpassed by his inability to grasp basic hygiene. He held aloft a tarnished spoon, its bowl filled with a viscous, greenish substance. Think they'll add extra arsenic this time? He chuckled, a sound like gravel grinding against bone. Silas barely glanced up. Arsenic is so last century, Bartholomew, he said, his voice a low, smooth baritone that belied the icy calculation within. These days, one needs a touch more. Sophistication. Bartholomew, oblivious to the subtle threat, merely grinned and lumbered off, his spoon sloshing precariously. The others, similarly disturbed, continued their rituals of madness, a grotesque ballet of the mentally fractured. But Silas watched them, his eyes analyzing, calculating. He saw their weaknesses, their predictable patterns, their vulnerabilities. He saw the cracks in the system, the chinks in the armor of this self-proclaimed fortress of sanity. He saw his escape. Silas's past was a tapestry woven with threads of abandonment, betrayal, and violence. He was a survivor, forged in the fires of adversity, shaped by the unforgiving realities of a world that had spat him out like a spoiled seed. He was a child of the streets who'd learned the value of observation, the subtle art of manipulation. He'd honed his skills in a world of hustles and heists, where every interaction was a calculated risk, every word a potential weapon. The Nutt House, with its predictable routines and its population of easily manipulated individuals, was merely the latest canvas for his meticulously crafted masterpiece, his escape. His plan was a symphony of deception, a carefully orchestrated ballet of chaos and control. It began with the smallest of gestures, the subtlest of manipulations. He started by planting seeds of discord amongst the other patients, subtly fanning the flames of their existing tensions. He used their paranoia, their delusions, their very madness against them, turning them into unwitting pawns in his grand escape. He studied the guards, observing their routines, identifying their weaknesses. He learned their schedules, recognizing patterns in their patrols. He would exploit their laziness and their complacency. He would use their predictable nature to his advantage. He began collecting information, scavenging scraps of paper, listening to conversations. He used scraps of fabric, discarded buttons, and even food remnants to create tools for his escape. He was resourceful, making use of whatever he could find. He knew the layout of the hospital intimately, and his observation skills were unparalleled. He anticipated every move, every reaction, every potential obstacle in his path. He had turned the constraints of his environment into advantages. He was crafting a symphony of deception. A carefully orchestrated ballet of chaos. He was orchestrating the destruction of his own cage. One seemingly insignificant incident, a stolen key, a misplaced report, a seemingly accidental power outage. It would all become important. Each seemingly small victory, a testament to his methodical planning, provided him with more leverage, his escape plan growing ever clearer with each small victory. These minor setbacks, which seemed insignificant at first glance, were in reality opportunities that he would use to his advantage. They were integral parts of his grand design. He was the conductor of this symphony of chaos, meticulously orchestrating every note. The power outage, a stroke of luck or perhaps a carefully orchestrated event, would be the crescendo of this intricate composition. The plunging darkness that enveloped the Nutt House wasn't just an accident, it was the key to unlocking his freedom. It was an opportunity to seize the chaos and use it to his advantage. The shrieks of fear, the desperate calls for help, the confusion that descended upon the institution, these were the notes of his masterpiece. He would use the chaos to cover his tracks. He would use the fear to create diversions. He would use the confusion to slip away unnoticed. His escape wouldn't be a messy, desperate scramble, it would be a carefully planned maneuver within a maelstrom of chaos. He would turn the very essence of his confinement into his means of liberation. The chipped mug warmed Silas's hands, a meager comfort against the chill that seeped from the ancient stone walls. He traced the crack, a jagged line mirroring the fissures in his own fractured past. Memories, sharp and brutal, flickered like dying embers, the alleyway brawl that left him with a scar hidden beneath his collar, the biting wind of a Chicago winter, the hollow ache of abandonment. He'd lived a life on the fringes, a ghost in the machine of society, a predator in the urban jungle. The Nutt House, with its echoing corridors and the unsettling symphony of madness, was merely another, albeit more contained, hunting ground. His escape wouldn't be a desperate lunge, it would be a carefully choreographed dance, a ballet of deception played out on the stage of institutionalized chaos. He knew the Nutt House like the back of his hand, its predictable routines, the blind spots in its security, the vulnerabilities of its inhabitants. He'd spent weeks, months even, studying them, the guards, their shift changes, their coffee breaks, the subtle nuances of their boredom and complacency. He'd charted their patrols like a general plotting a siege, identifying the weak points in their defenses. He'd begun his preparations subtly. A loose floorboard in the common room, a seemingly accidental spill of cleaning solution near a security camera, each small act was a brushstroke in his grand masterpiece. He'd even managed to cultivate an unlikely alliance with Bartholomew, whose spoon collection was rivaled only by his childlike trust. Bartholomew, with his single-minded obsession, was a useful tool, a clumsy but effective distraction. Silas had subtly guided Bartholomew's clumsy actions, turning his quirks into opportunities. A misplaced spoon here, a spilled bowl of gruel there, subtle delays that would prove valuable in the grand scheme. Silas's past life hadn't been spent solely in the squalor of the streets. Before his descent into the abyss, he'd shown flashes of brilliance, a strategic mind capable of intricate planning. A flashback, sharp and vivid, transported him to a smoky back room, the air thick with the smell of stale beer and desperation. He was younger then, sharper, the lines of worry not yet etched deep into his face. He was manipulating a poker game, subtly influencing the hands, guiding the cards with almost invisible movements, his expression betraying nothing. He'd cleaned out the room, leaving nothing but bewildered faces and empty wallets. That same cunning, that same ability to anticipate and manipulate, was now being channeled into his escape from the Nutt House. The flashbacks were brief, fleeting glimpses into a life lived on the edge, a testament to his adaptability and resilience. Each memory provided a piece of the puzzle, sharpening his focus, reinforcing his resolve. He was a master of disguise, a chameleon blending seamlessly into any environment. He used his keen observation skills to analyze the body language of his fellow patients, the subtle shifts in their behavior providing him with valuable insights. He understood the power of suggestion, the subtle manipulation that could bend even the most stubborn wills. He was a puppet master, pulling strings, weaving a complex web of deceit. He used the other patients as tools, fueling their existing paranoia and delusions to create a smokescreen for his actions. He planted whispers, subtly altering the flow of gossip, directing their attention away from his activities. One patient, a delusional artist who believed he could paint the future, became a pawn in his game, his grandiose canvases unintentionally obscuring Silas's movements. Another, a man obsessed with codes and ciphers, unwittingly helped Silas decipher the hospital's internal security protocols. His plan relied on exploiting the institution's systemic flaws. The understaffing, the lax security protocols, the predictable routines of the guards, these were all weaknesses that Silas had meticulously identified and catalogued. He'd painstakingly documented the patrol routes, timing the guards' movements with the precision of a seasoned surgeon. He knew exactly when and where he could move without being seen, when the guards would be distracted, when the system would be at its most vulnerable. The tools of his escape were surprisingly mundane: a sharpened spoon from Bartholomew's collection, a piece of wire salvaged from a broken bed frame, a length of discarded shoelace. He'd fashioned a lockpick with astonishing skill, his nimble fingers working with the precision of a seasoned thief. His resourcefulness was uncanny. He transformed ordinary objects into tools, turning the very materials of his confinement into instruments of his liberation. He meticulously gathered his resources, hiding them in inconspicuous places, beneath loose floorboards, within the hollow spaces of walls, inside discarded books. He was a master of concealment, blending his preparations into the everyday chaos of the Nutt House. He was patient, meticulous, letting the very nature of the institution work to his advantage. The constant noise, the erratic behavior of his fellow patients, the general atmosphere of controlled madness, all acted as a perfect cover for his activities. Silas wasn't merely escaping, he was orchestrating a masterpiece of deception. His escape would be a symphony of chaos, a carefully constructed series of events designed to create diversions, to confuse and mislead his pursuers. The power outage, for instance, wasn't an accident, it was a carefully planned element of his escape. He'd subtly sabotaged the electrical system, using his knowledge of the building's infrastructure to create a window of opportunity. The ensuing pandemonium, the screams, the confusion, the frantic search for the source of the problem, this was the perfect cover for his escape. The chaos would obscure his movements, allowing him to slip away unnoticed. He would use the fear and the pandemonium as his cloak, his getaway. His escape wasn't a desperate flight but a meticulously planned maneuver amidst a storm of controlled chaos. His escape was not simply about physical freedom, it was about reclaiming his agency, about proving his resilience, about demonstrating his mastery over a system designed to control him. He was not a victim, but a survivor, a strategist, a puppet master pulling the strings of his own destiny. The gates of the Nutt House, with their groaning hinges and their rusty teeth, would soon yield to his cunning, his determination, his meticulously planned masterpiece. The cage was about to be unlocked. His symphony of chaos was about to reach its crescendo. The fluorescent lights hummed a discordant tune, a soundtrack to the simmering tension in the common room. Silas, outwardly calm, meticulously cleaned his chipped mug, his movements deceptively casual. He observed, his gaze sharp and calculating, as the other patients drifted into their usual patterns of dysfunction. He saw the cracks in their facades, the vulnerabilities hidden beneath layers of delusion and despair. He saw the system's weaknesses mirrored in their fragile psyches. His plan wasn't about brute force, it was about subtle manipulation, a delicate dance of psychological warfare waged on the unsuspecting staff and his fellow inmates. He'd spent months studying their routines, their prejudices, their anxieties, building a detailed psychological map of the Nutt House's inhabitants. He was a puppeteer, and they, his unwitting marionettes. He started small, a whispered suggestion here, a carefully placed rumor there. He'd skillfully turned Edgar, a paranoid schizophrenic with a penchant for conspiracy theories, against the head nurse, Sister Agnes, planting seeds of doubt about her loyalty and competence. Edgar, already convinced of a vast government conspiracy, readily accepted Silas's subtly manipulative whispers, seeing them as confirmation of his existing beliefs. He became a useful tool, spreading mistrust and sowing discord among the staff. Meanwhile, Silas worked on Bartholomew, whose obsession with spoons bordered on the pathological. Silas strategically lost a particularly ornate spoon belonging to Bartholomew, feigning concern. Bartholomew, in his innocent simplicity, was easily manipulated, his search for the missing spoon becoming a distraction, diverting attention from Silas's other activities. Silas used Bartholomew's distress to create opportunities for himself, his frantic searching providing moments of distraction for the staff. He fueled the simmering rivalries among the patients, subtly intensifying their existing conflicts. He manipulated their delusions and paranoia, using their anxieties as weapons. He'd whisper half-truths, plant insidious suggestions, and watch as their internal conflicts erupted, creating chaos and diverting the attention of the staff away from his own activities. His words were carefully calibrated, precise instruments designed to amplify the existing fractures within the community. He was a master orchestrator, playing on their fears and insecurities to further his own aims. The tension ratcheted up. The atmosphere grew thicker, charged with a volatile mix of paranoia and suspicion. The staff, already stretched thin, were increasingly on edge, their efforts to maintain order hampered by the escalating conflicts among the patients. Silas bided his time, his patience a weapon as deadly as any blade. He watched, waited, and subtly manipulated events, his influence spreading like a subtle poison. Then came the incident of the missing key. A seemingly insignificant event, but for Silas, a crucial step in his plan. During a routine shift change, while the guards were preoccupied with the sudden and inexplicable disappearance of a vital security key, Silas moved with the precision of a phantom. He'd observed the key's location, memorized the guards' movements, and anticipated the moment of distraction. The theft was executed with surgical precision. It was quick, clean, almost invisible. The key was a small, insignificant-looking item, yet it represented a significant victory in Silas's larger strategy. It was a symbol of his growing control over his environment, a tiny crack in the imposing facade of the institution. His heart quickened not with fear, but with a thrill of anticipation, a cold satisfaction that sent a shiver down his spine. He felt a surge of exhilaration. This small victory was a taste of his impending triumph. The missing key triggered a frantic search, creating a ripple effect of chaos that momentarily distracted the staff, allowing Silas to move freely and subtly adjust other aspects of his escape plan. The stolen key was more than just a key, it was a testament to his growing control over the system, a symbol of his ability to manipulate events and people to his own ends. It was a small crack in the wall, a chink in the armor of the institution that contained him. The ensuing chaos was a carefully orchestrated symphony of controlled pandemonium. The staff's frantic efforts to locate the key, compounded by the already existing tensions among the patients, created the perfect smokescreen for Silas. He observed from the shadows, a silent observer directing the orchestra of chaos, his subtle actions further escalating the situation. He watched as the staff's attention was diverted, their focus shifting from the systematic vulnerabilities to the urgent search for a seemingly trivial item, the small metal key that was, in reality, a symbol of his power. The stolen key was a small but significant victory. It provided Silas with a tangible sense of accomplishment, a reinforcement of his ability to manipulate the environment, to bend the system to his will. It was a crucial piece of the puzzle, a stepping stone towards his ultimate goal, escape. But it also represented a deeper, more fundamental triumph. It symbolized his victory over the constraints of the system that had attempted to confine him, his growing sense of power over his own destiny. The air crackled with tension. The stolen key was a catalyst, exacerbating the existing unrest within the Nutt House. Silas felt a surge of adrenaline, a thrilling mixture of fear and excitement. The risk was high, the consequences dire, but the potential reward, freedom, made the gamble worthwhile. The tension was palpable, the atmosphere thick with the anticipation of something big, something dangerous about to happen. The stage was set for the next act in Silas's elaborate plan. The first crack in the system had been made, and Silas was ready to exploit the widening fissure. The cage, it seemed, was starting to unravel. The fluorescent lights flickered, then died, plunging the Nutt House into an oppressive darkness. A collective gasp, a cacophony of startled cries, filled the air, replaced instantly by a chilling silence, broken only by the frantic thump-thump-thump of a disturbed heartbeat, Silas's S. This was it, the moment he had meticulously orchestrated, the culmination of months of psychological maneuvering. The power outage, a stroke of luck, or perhaps, a meticulously planted seed, had gifted him the perfect cover. The darkness was a physical entity, a suffocating blanket that amplified the fear simmering within the institution's walls. The smell of stale disinfectant, usually faint, now hung heavy in the air, mingling with the metallic tang of fear, a scent Silas found strangely invigorating. The cold, damp concrete beneath his feet felt like a living thing, its chill seeping into his bones. He could feel the pulse of the chaos rippling outward from the sudden darkness, a wave of panic washing over the inhabitants of the Nutt House. A woman's scream, high-pitched and laced with terror, sliced through the silence. It was Agnes, Sister Agnes, her voice betraying the veneer of control she so desperately tried to maintain. He'd anticipated her reaction, she was predictable in her fragility. Her fear, he knew, would be contagious, spreading like wildfire among the already volatile patients. Edgar, his paranoia amplified by the darkness, began to mutter about shadowy figures and government conspiracies, his voice a low, frantic drone punctuated by bursts of incoherent rambling. He clutched a crumpled newspaper, convinced it contained coded messages revealing the true nature of the conspiracy. Bartholomew, meanwhile, was a pitiful figure, his frantic whispers about his missing spoon swallowed by the enveloping darkness. His frantic groping added to the growing cacophony. The darkness, Silas realized, was an equalizer. It stripped away the perceived authority of the staff, reducing them to frightened figures stumbling through the shadows. It amplified the existing anxieties and insecurities of the patients, creating a maelstrom of unpredictable behavior. Silas moved with the stealth of a shadow, his senses heightened by the darkness. He felt his way along the cold walls, his steps carefully placed, guided by his precise understanding of the building's layout. He navigated the maze of corridors, his ears attuned to the sounds of escalating panic. A scuffle erupted near the main entrance. A guard, his voice laced with strained authority, attempted to restore order. But his words were lost in the rising tide of chaos. The patients, their inhibitions unleashed by the darkness and the absence of authority, were acting out their deepest fears and frustrations. He heard the guttural growl of a man Silas recognized as Bruno, a patient with a history of violent outbursts. Bruno's rage, amplified by the darkness and the escalating chaos, threatened to spill over into something truly dangerous. The sound of breaking glass, a sickening crunch, sent a shiver down Silas's spine, but it also provided the perfect distraction. Silas seized the opportunity, his movements swift and silent. He slipped past the struggling guard, his body brushing against the man's arm. The guard, distracted by the growing tumult, didn't notice him. Silas moved towards the security room, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He imagined the guard's frustration, the sheer helplessness of the situation. The chaos was a symphony, and he was its conductor. Reaching the security room, he discovered the door unlocked. The staff, in their panicked search for the missing key, had neglected to secure it. Another stroke of luck, or perhaps, a calculated move. Silas smiled. The key was a mere formality, now. The power outage had rendered it obsolete. The darkness itself was the key to his escape. Inside, he disabled the remaining security systems with surprising ease, his knowledge of their inner workings a testament to his patient observation. He bypassed the alarms, silencing them with a practiced hand. The entire operation felt almost surgical, an elegant dismantling of the system's defenses. He then made his way to the maintenance closet, retrieving a crowbar he'd discreetly stashed there weeks ago, another meticulously planned piece of the puzzle. The crowbar was his insurance policy. It was a blunt instrument, yet effective in a world governed by primal anxieties. The clanging of the crowbar against metal echoed in the claustrophobic space, a jarring contrast to the muffled screams and shouts from the main corridors. With a final heave, Silas pried open a service hatch leading to the outside, the cool night air a welcome contrast to the stifling atmosphere within. He climbed through the opening, the rough edges of the metal scratching his skin, a small price to pay for freedom. As he emerged into the darkness, the oppressive weight of the institution lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a thrilling sense of liberation. The grounds of the Nutt House were shrouded in darkness, the only illumination provided by a distant streetlight. He moved through the undergrowth, the rough branches scratching against his clothes. He could still hear the sounds of chaos emanating from the building behind him, a symphony of fear and violence that he had orchestrated. It was a distant, fading sound, quickly overtaken by the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves, the sounds of freedom. But even in the darkness, the adrenaline rush was still present, tangible. He was a free man, but not quite yet safe. The authorities would be searching for him, and his unique brand of chaos wouldn't go unnoticed. He knew he had to disappear quickly and completely, to melt back into the shadows. His escape was not simply about leaving the Nutt House, it was about vanishing, leaving no trace, becoming a ghost in the machine. He had played the game, mastered the system, and now, he was ready for the final act, disappearing. The chaos at the Nutt House had been a carefully constructed symphony. Now, he would compose his own, a silent, deadly sonata of escape. The cage was broken, but the game, he knew, had only just begun. The chilling silence that followed the power outage was shattered by the frantic barking of a dog, a blood-curdling, high-pitched howl that echoed through the deserted corridors. It was Buster, the institution's resident canine, usually a docile creature, but now driven to a frenzy by the sudden darkness and the unsettling commotion. His frantic yapping was a jarring counterpoint to the human cries of terror and confusion. Dr. Albright, the head psychiatrist, a man whose composure usually bordered on the glacial, stumbled through the darkness, his flashlight beam cutting erratic swaths through the shadows. His usually polished shoes were now scuffed and muddied, a testament to the chaotic scramble. The sight of him, a pillar of authority reduced to a floundering figure, only served to amplify the panic. He barked orders, His voice strained and high-pitched, his words swallowed by the escalating din. Nurse Ratched, her face a mask of controlled fury, struggled to maintain order, her voice a shrill counterpoint to the growing chaos. She was a veteran of the Nutt House, hardened to the eccentricities of its inhabitants, but even she was rattled by the sudden, unexpected power failure and its ensuing pandemonium. She tried to corral the patients, her efforts met with a mixture of defiance, confusion, and outright violence. Meanwhile, the security guards, normally aloof and indifferent, were reduced to a state of panicked disarray. They moved clumsily in the darkness, their flashlights illuminating fleeting glimpses of fear and confusion on their faces. Their usually authoritative demeanor was replaced with a palpable sense of helplessness. The meticulously crafted illusion of control, the carefully constructed walls of the institution, had crumbled under the weight of unexpected chaos. The discovery of Silas's absence was not a dramatic event. It was far more subtle, a slow dawning realization that added to the growing sense of unease and escalating terror. It wasn't a missing person report but a series of small, insignificant details. First, the unsettling quietness in Silas's cell. Then, the unsettlingly empty bed, the undisturbed blanket, a meticulously arranged deception. This sparked a frantic search, a desperate scramble through the labyrinthine corridors of the Nutt House. The initial investigation was a shambles, a chaotic ballet of confusion and conflicting accounts. Each staff member offered a slightly different version of events, their narratives laced with inconsistencies and gaps. The power outage had not only plunged the institution into darkness but had also thrown its carefully constructed system of order into disarray, creating a smokescreen of confusion that shielded Silas's escape. The staff's testimony revealed a pattern of selective memory, a subconscious desire to downplay their own shortcomings, their own role in the unfolding catastrophe. The investigation focused initially on the other patients, their unpredictable behavior providing a convenient scapegoat for the authorities. Agnes, still trembling from her ordeal, recounted a fragmented narrative, filled with wild accusations and hallucinations, rendering her testimony largely useless. Edgar, his paranoia amplified by the power outage and Silas's absence, claimed to have witnessed a shadowy figure, a government agent, he insisted, orchestrating the escape. Bartholomew, clinging to his tattered blanket, insisted that Silas had absconded with his spoon, a detail that only served to highlight the absurdity of the situation. The police, alerted to the disturbance, arrived at the Nutt House to a scene of controlled chaos. The officers, hardened veterans of countless crime scenes, were nonetheless unnerved by the atmosphere, the unsettling mix of fear and madness that permeated the air. They moved through the corridors, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, their faces betraying a mixture of apprehension and bewilderment. The sight of the patients, their faces pale with terror or contorted with rage, only served to heighten the sense of unease. The investigation stalled, hampered by the power outage and the chaotic aftermath. The security footage was unusable, the alarms had been cleverly disabled. The staff were unable to provide a coherent account of the events, their recollections muddled and contradictory. The investigation had become a hopeless effort to piece together a shattered narrative, a testament to Silas's methodical planning and his chillingly effective execution. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pale gray and bruised purple, the full extent of Silas's escape became tragically clear. He had vanished, leaving behind only a trail of confusion and suspicion, a void where his presence had once been. His absence hung in the air, a palpable entity, casting a long shadow over the institution. The manhunt began, a relentless pursuit that spanned across the city and beyond. Silas, however, was long gone. He had melted back into the shadows, a phantom haunting the city streets, a ghost in the machine. His escape was not simply a physical act, it was a statement, a testament to his resilience, his cunning, and his mastery of the system. He had become the master of his own destiny, weaving a path through the labyrinthine streets, a figure both elusive and menacing. His escape was a testament to his understanding of human psychology, his uncanny ability to manipulate and exploit the weaknesses of those around him. He had played the game, mastered the rules, and he had won. The authorities were left with a daunting task, the search for a phantom, a man who had vanished into the very fabric of the city, leaving behind only a trail of chaos and suspicion. The weight of his escape fell heavily on the shoulders of Dr. Albright, who found himself grappling with the profound implications of Silas's actions. The incident cast a dark shadow over the institution, revealing its vulnerabilities and the inherent instability of its environment. The escape exposed the cracks in the carefully constructed facade of order and control, revealing the underbelly of the institution, a world of fear and unpredictability. The aftermath was a media frenzy, a cacophony of speculation and outrage. The press descended upon the Nutt House, their cameras flashing, their microphones thrust into the faces of distraught staff and concerned relatives. The institution, once a symbol of order and control, had become a spectacle of chaos and failure. The escape exposed its shortcomings and its deep-seated flaws, transforming it from a bastion of therapeutic intervention into a symbol of systemic failure. The hunt for Silas was relentless, but Silas remained elusive, a phantom in the city, a master of disguise. The police, baffled by his ability to vanish without a trace, found themselves grappling with a mystery that stretched beyond their expertise. They searched his cell, his few belongings offering little insight into his plans. His escape had been meticulously planned, a symphony of deception and manipulation. Every detail, every step, seemed orchestrated to perfection. Silas's disappearance was more than just an escape, it was a declaration of independence, a rejection of the constraints of society. It was a testament to the power of human resilience, to the tenacity of the human spirit in the face of adversity. It raised chilling questions about the nature of sanity and the inherent precariousness of the structures that confine and control us. The escape set the stage for a thrilling confrontation, a deadly game of cat and mouse, between the cunning escapee and the relentless pursuit of the authorities, a game where the stakes were life and death. The cage was broken, but the game was far from over. The silence following Silas's disappearance was deafening, a stark reminder of the chaos that he had left behind. The city held its breath, unaware of the impending storm. The game had just begun. Chapter 2. The chase begins. The city, normally a cacophony of horns, sirens, and the ceaseless hum of urban life, felt strangely subdued in the wake of Silas's escape. A nervous tension hung in the air, a silent acknowledgement of the invisible threat that lurked in its shadows. The police, initially flummoxed by the chaotic aftermath of the power outage at the Nutt House, quickly shifted into high gear. Detective Inspector Ava Thorne, a woman whose sharp intelligence was only matched by her cynical wit, took the lead. Ava, a veteran of countless investigations, found herself facing a puzzle unlike any she had encountered before. Silas wasn't just a clever criminal, he was a master manipulator, a chameleon who blended seamlessly into his surroundings. The initial phase of the manhunt focused on Silas's known associates, a ragtag bunch of lowlifes and misfits who populated the city's underbelly. These were the individuals Silas had interacted with during his numerous past incarcerations, a network of contacts forged in the crucible of crime. Interrogations were brutal, each suspect subjected to a relentless barrage of questions, their alibis dissected and scrutinized under the harsh glare of the interrogation lamps. Yet, Silas remained elusive, a ghost in the machine, his trail obscured by a network of carefully laid deceptions. Ava, despite her years of experience, found herself frustrated. Silas's actions defied logic, his methods a twisted blend of cunning and madness. He seemed to anticipate every move, every tactical shift, as if he were playing chess with the entire police department. His escape was not simply a flight, it was a performance, a macabre display of his intellectual superiority. She pored over case files, studying Silas's previous crimes, searching for patterns, for a clue to his next move. The deeper she delved, the more she realized that Silas wasn't just escaping, he was enacting a grand, twisted narrative, a macabre play with the city as his stage. The investigation expanded beyond Silas's immediate circle, reaching into the darker corners of the city's underbelly. The detectives followed a trail of cryptic messages, hidden clues left in the form of seemingly innocuous objects, a discarded cigarette butt, a torn piece of newspaper, a single playing card. Each clue was a breadcrumb, leading them down a winding path of deception. The pursuit became a race against time, a relentless chase through dimly lit back alleys, crowded nightclubs, and the labyrinthine corridors of the city's underworld. One of Silas's known associates, a wiry, shifty character named Frankie Fingers Malone, initially claimed complete ignorance. But under the relentless pressure of Ava's interrogation, cracks appeared in his facade. He revealed snippets of information, a rendezvous point, a coded message exchanged through a seemingly innocent pawn shop, a shadowy figure known only as the Collector. This Collector was apparently Silas's main contact, an individual who provided Silas with supplies, information, and escape routes. The investigation extended its reach to the Nutt House itself. The staff were re-interviewed, their statements compared and contrasted. The discrepancies in their accounts started to form a worrying pattern. A growing suspicion arose that someone within the institution might have aided Silas's escape, possibly for a significant sum of money or personal reasons. As the manhunt intensified, a secondary plot line began to emerge within the police department. Whispers of internal corruption circulated in the hushed tones of clandestine meetings. A detective sergeant, known for his dubious dealings and questionable loyalty, seemed unusually interested in Silas's case, more interested, Ava suspected, in the potential for personal gain than in bringing Silas to justice. He was constantly just a step ahead, often seeming to anticipate their moves, subtly disrupting investigations. Ava, ever vigilant, began to notice a pattern of anomalies, discrepancies that seemed too convenient to be coincidental. Reports would disappear, leads would go cold, and vital pieces of evidence would mysteriously vanish. It became clear that a mole existed within the department, someone leaking information to Silas or his accomplices. This realization sent a chill down Ava's spine. The pursuit had become a double-edged game, not only against Silas, but also against a hidden enemy within her own ranks. The pawn shop, mentioned by Frankie Fingers, became a focal point of the investigation. Undercover officers were deployed, observing the shop's activities, their presence unnoticed among the usual clientele of pawnbrokers and shady characters. Days turned into nights as they meticulously documented every transaction, every visitor, painstakingly piecing together the fragmented puzzle. They discovered that the pawn shop served as a conduit for information, a hub for communication between Silas and the outside world. Meanwhile, the media frenzy surrounding Silas's escape intensified. News channels devoted hours of airtime to the story, speculation running rampant, with theories ranging from the mundane to the downright outlandish. The public was captivated, a morbid curiosity fueled by the enigma that was Silas. Ava found herself navigating not just the complex investigation, but also the storm of public opinion, constantly deflecting rumors and misinterpretations. Further complicating matters was the public's perception of the Nutt House itself. The institution's failures were brutally exposed, its shortcomings thrown into sharp relief by Silas's daring escape. The media portrayed the institution as a breeding ground for chaos and incompetence, fueling public distrust and prompting demands for reform. Ava had to contend not just with Silas, but with the growing pressure from the public and the authorities, all eager for a quick resolution. Ava's suspicions about the internal betrayal grew stronger. She started meticulously reviewing every communication, every meeting, every interaction within the department. She noticed a pattern of seemingly insignificant actions, a misplaced file, a delayed response, a seemingly casual conversation that was far more revealing upon closer examination. She began to suspect that the corrupt officer was not merely leaking information but actively assisting Silas, paving the way for his escape and providing a safe haven once he had vanished. The chase had become a deadly game of wits, a relentless pursuit through the city's dark underbelly. Ava's team worked tirelessly, following leads, conducting surveillance, conducting countless interviews, all while grappling with the betrayal within their own ranks. The pressure was immense, the stakes higher than ever before. The city, once unaware, now held its breath, anxiously awaiting the climax of this terrifying game of cat and mouse. The hunt for Silas was no longer just a police operation, it had become a test of Ava's skill, her resilience, and her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of corruption and deception. The game was far from over. The chase was on. The discarded syringe, found nestled amongst the overflowing refuse bins behind a derelict pharmacy, was hardly the sort of evidence one would expect to find in a high-stakes police investigation. But to Detective Inspector Ava Thorne, it was a beacon in the swirling fog of Silas's elaborate deception. The syringe, almost certainly used for an opiate cocktail, was not merely discarded, it was placed, strategically positioned near a bus stop frequented by known associates of Silas's, a calculated move designed to divert attention. This was Silas's signature, a meticulous orchestration of chaos, a carefully crafted puzzle box designed to frustrate and mislead. Ava traced the syringe back to a small, independent pharmacy in the city's less salubrious district. The pharmacist, a nervous man with trembling hands and eyes that darted nervously around the room, initially denied any involvement. But under the steady pressure of Ava's interrogation, a blend of gentle persuasion and unwavering intensity, he cracked. He revealed that a man fitting Silas's description had purchased a large quantity of prescription-strength opioids several days before the escape, paying in cash, of course. He even described the man's peculiar habit of meticulously wiping down every surface he touched, a detail that chilled Ava to the bone. This meticulousness, this obsessive attention to detail, was the key to understanding Silas. He wasn't merely escaping, he was conducting a grand experiment in deception, a psychological chess match with the entire city as his playing board. Ava found herself admiring his audacity, his sheer chutzpah, even as she worked tirelessly to unravel his intricate web of lies. Flashbacks, gleaned from Silas's extensive file, revealed a childhood steeped in neglect and abuse. He was a product of a broken system, a societal outcast who had learned early on that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. His early crimes, petty theft, vandalism, escalating to more serious offenses, were not simply acts of delinquency, they were carefully calculated maneuvers, a means of survival in a world that had rejected him. He wasn't driven by a simple thirst for money or power, his motivations ran much deeper, fueled by a twisted sense of justice and a burning desire for revenge against a society he felt had betrayed him. He had spent years in and out of various institutions, each experience shaping his manipulative tactics. The Nutt House, with its lax security and its staff burdened by an overwhelming workload, was not a random choice of escape, it was a carefully chosen target, an institution ripe for exploitation. He had studied its weaknesses, its vulnerabilities, meticulously planning his escape for months, anticipating every potential obstacle. The red herrings Silas left in his wake were far more than simple distractions, they were calculated misdirections, leading the police down a rabbit hole of false leads, wasting precious time and resources. A torn photograph of a seemingly insignificant landmark, a partially burnt letter with an indecipherable message, each clue was a carefully placed piece in Silas's grand game of deception. The investigation wasn't simply a pursuit, it was a battle of wits, a psychological duel between Ava and Silas, played out against the backdrop of the city's sprawling cityscape. Ava found herself constantly anticipating Silas's next move, second-guessing his motivations, trying to anticipate his thought process. She spent hours poring over maps, tracing his potential routes, studying his modus operandi, a blend of audaciousness and chilling calculation that defied conventional criminal profiling. Ava's team worked relentlessly, following each lead, meticulously verifying each clue, sifting through mountains of useless information to find the nuggets of truth. They interviewed witnesses, interrogated suspects, and ran countless background checks, but Silas always remained one step ahead, his trail obscured by a carefully constructed labyrinth of deceptions. One of the most frustrating aspects of the investigation was the sheer brilliance of Silas's deception. He was a master of misdirection, a chameleon capable of blending seamlessly into any environment. He knew how to manipulate people, how to exploit their weaknesses, how to turn their prejudices against them. He understood the power of suggestion, the subtle art of planting false memories, creating doubt and uncertainty wherever he went. But Ava was not easily dissuaded. Her experience had taught her that even the most meticulous plan contained flaws. She focused on the inconsistencies, the subtle anomalies in Silas's trail, the seemingly insignificant details that often held the key to understanding the bigger picture. The pawn shop, previously identified as a possible conduit for Silas's communication, yielded more clues. A hidden compartment in a discarded antique music box held a microfiche, containing a series of coded messages. Decoding these messages proved to be a Herculean task, requiring the expertise of a specialist cryptographer. The messages revealed a network of accomplices, far more extensive than initially suspected, suggesting a deeper conspiracy that went beyond simple escape. The conspiracy seemed to extend beyond the immediate circle of Silas's known associates. It hinted at a powerful, shadowy organization operating within the city's underbelly, an organization with access to resources and information that went far beyond the reach of the average criminal. The internal investigation within the police department continued, Ava focusing her efforts on the suspicious detective sergeant. His seemingly innocuous actions were slowly revealing a pattern of deliberate obstruction, of information deliberately suppressed or withheld, of leads conveniently going cold. She suspected that this sergeant wasn't merely corrupt, he was a crucial part of Silas's escape plan, actively protecting him from detection. The chapter culminated in a surprising twist. While searching the sergeant's apartment, Ava discovered a hidden compartment containing Silas's personal journal. The journal revealed a startling truth. Silas wasn't merely escaping from the Nutt House, he was on a mission, pursuing a long-dormant vendetta. The target of his wrath was not the police or the city, it was a specific individual, a powerful figure implicated in Silas's tragic past. His escape wasn't just a flight from justice, it was the opening gambit in a game of revenge. And Ava, unexpectedly, found herself thrust into the middle of it, her own life now intertwined with the twisted narrative of a man hell-bent on retribution. The chase was far from over. The game, it turned out, was only just beginning. The flickering neon sign of the Crimson Cobra tattoo parlor cast a lurid glow on the rain-slicked street. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of antiseptic and something vaguely floral, a bizarre counterpoint to the humming tattoo guns and the low thrum of heavy metal music. Silas, his face obscured by the shadows of a worn baseball cap, sat across from a woman whose tattooed skin resembled a living tapestry. Her name was Viper, and her reputation preceded her. A master of disguise, a chameleon who could melt into any crowd, leaving no trace. Their meeting wasn't a chance encounter. Silas had meticulously researched Viper, her skills, her vulnerabilities, her price. He'd learned that her loyalty was fluid, dictated not by sentiment but by self-interest. Their alliance, therefore, was built not on friendship, but on a cold, pragmatic calculation. Silas needed Viper's expertise to reshape his identity, to melt into the city's underbelly, leaving no trace for Ava Thorne to follow. Viper, in turn, saw the opportunity for a lucrative job, a chance to test her skills against a formidable opponent, the city's most wanted fugitive. "You're asking a lot," Viper said, her voice husky, a low growl that matched her appearance. She traced a long, thin scar that snaked across her cheekbone, a memento of a past confrontation. A complete transformation. New identity, new look, new history. "It's risky, Silas. One wrong move, and I'll be sharing a cell with you." Silas smiled, a flash of teeth in the dim light. "Risk is my middle name, darling. And I'm prepared to pay handsomely for your discretion." He slid a small, unmarked envelope across the table. Viper's eyes gleamed with avarice as she weighed the envelope, feeling the satisfying heft of the cash inside. Money talked, and Silas spoke fluently in the language of wealth. The transformation was swift and meticulous. Viper's expertise was evident in every detail. Silas's dark hair was bleached blonde, his face reshaped with deft application of prosthetics, his eyes subtly altered with contact lenses. He became someone else entirely, a different age, a different build, a different demeanor. The man who emerged from the Crimson Cobra was almost unrecognizable, a blank slate upon which Silas could paint a new identity, a new life. Their next stop was a cramped, dimly lit apartment in the city's less desirable part of town. Here resided another of Silas's unlikely allies, a former military technician, known only as Fixer. Fixer's specialty was technology, his nimble fingers capable of bypassing security systems, creating false trails, and erasing digital footprints. Fixer's services were far more valuable than a simple locksmith's or even a seasoned computer hacker's. Fixer could make people and data disappear. He could twist digital information into a tangled mess that would be a nightmare to unravel, and his payment requests were just as complicated and intricate. Unlike Viper, Fixer was less driven by greed and more by a sense of intellectual challenge. He saw Silas not as a criminal, but as a fascinating puzzle, an intricate mechanism to be studied and manipulated. He enjoyed the cat-and-mouse game, the intellectual sparring match that played out between them. The challenge, the intellectual stimulation, proved to be sufficient enough compensation. Fixer, with his arsenal of hacking tools and his encyclopedic knowledge of digital security, created a virtual ghost, a phantom that existed only in the shadows of the internet. He forged false identities, wiped hard drives clean, deleted emails, and created elaborate diversions, leaving Ava Thorne and her team chasing ghosts, trailing behind layers of fabricated digital trails. But their alliance was as fragile as it was unexpected. Silas had ensured that each member of his team had a specific, limited role, their tasks carefully compartmentalized. He revealed just enough information, just enough of his plan to gain their cooperation without exposing his ultimate goals. He played on their individual weaknesses, their desires, their fears, manipulating them with the precision of a master puppeteer. Viper, for example, had a penchant for luxury goods and high-stakes gambling. Silas knew that she was likely to betray him for a larger payout, so he played it shrewdly. He compensated her lavishly, but kept her in the dark about the overall nature of his mission. He made sure she would be expendable if need be. With Fixer, it was a matter of ego. Fixer craved the intellectual stimulation, the challenge of outsmarting the police. Silas fed his ego, offering puzzles and riddles, ensuring that his intelligence felt valued. This manipulation created a precarious balance, one that could shatter at any moment. Their collaboration wasn't based on trust, but on a complex web of mutual benefit, a fragile truce built on self-interest. Silas understood that these alliances would hold only as long as he kept everyone playing their assigned role, each convinced that they were manipulating him while simultaneously being expertly manipulated themselves. He held the strings, pulling them with calculated precision, leaving each member believing they were one step ahead and yet still falling perfectly into his intricate plan. The chase intensified, the police investigation drawing closer with each passing day. Ava Thorne, relentless and perceptive, was slowly closing in, uncovering the intricate web of deceit Silas had woven. Yet, each step forward for Ava was countered by Silas's carefully calculated moves, his unexpected alliances proving a formidable shield against capture. The city, a sprawling maze of shadows and secrets, became their battleground, a stage for a deadly game of cat and mouse played out against the backdrop of urban decay and flickering neon lights. The unexpected alliances were not just a means of escape, they were a testament to Silas's cunning, his ability to exploit human vulnerabilities and turn them to his advantage. His escape, far from being a simple flight from justice, was morphing into a complex operation, a symphony of deceit, orchestrated with chilling precision, highlighting the precarious nature of trust and the unpredictable alliances that can be forged in the face of desperation and danger. Each unexpected alliance was a gamble, a dangerous game of poker where the stakes were freedom, and maybe, even survival. And Silas, the master manipulator, was playing with a hand loaded with aces. Ava Thorne slammed her fist on the table, the sound echoing in the sterile conference room. Scattered maps, crime scene photos, and digital printouts covered the surface, a testament to the relentless pursuit of Silas. Her team, a collection of seasoned detectives, sat around the table, their faces etched with exhaustion and frustration. Silas, the ghost who'd slipped through their fingers, was taunting them, leaving a trail of cryptic clues, each one a deliberate act of defiance, a calculated insult. "He's playing us," Detective Miller muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. "He's enjoying this. It's a game to him, a perverse kind of chess match." Ava knew he was right. Silas wasn't just escaping, he was orchestrating a masterpiece of manipulation, a psychological game designed to frustrate and demoralize. His escape from the Nutt House wasn't a panicked flight but a meticulously planned operation, a testament to his cunning and his chilling understanding of human nature. He'd used his time in the institution not to break down, but to hone his skills, to sharpen his mind, to become a master strategist. The evidence pointed to his unexpected alliances: Viper, the tattoo artist, and Fixer, the tech whiz, individuals operating on the fringes of society, skilled in deception and accustomed to living in the shadows. Their involvement was a calculated risk on Silas's part, a gamble that had paid off handsomely. He'd used their unique skill sets to create a digital ghost, a phantom that moved through the city's underbelly, leaving behind a trail of false leads and deliberately misleading information. Ava studied the latest data, a series of encrypted messages intercepted from a dark web forum frequented by hackers and criminals. Silas's digital footprint, or rather, the carefully constructed illusion of one, was littered with red herrings, deliberate misdirections designed to throw the investigation off course. The messages were cryptic, filled with riddles and coded language, each a calculated taunt to Ava and her team. "He's showing off," Sergeant Davies commented, his voice laced with a mix of anger and grudging admiration. "He's deliberately leaving these messages, flaunting his intelligence, daring us to catch him." Ava felt a surge of frustration. She was used to dealing with cunning criminals, but Silas was different. He possessed a chilling intellect, a capacity for cold, calculated manipulation that was almost unnerving. He was playing a psychological game, pushing her buttons, testing her limits, relishing her frustration. She knew she had to be smarter, faster, more ruthless. The chase led them through a labyrinthine network of dimly lit back alleys, abandoned warehouses, and clandestine meeting places, each location carefully selected by Silas to exploit the city's vulnerabilities. He was using the city itself as a weapon, a tool to evade capture. His knowledge of the city's shadows was as impressive as his understanding of the city's technological networks. One of their leads took them to a deserted dockyard, the air thick with the smell of salt and decay. They found a small, unmarked boat, its hull freshly painted, its engine humming quietly. The boat was clearly recently used. Traces of blood, later identified as belonging to a small-time criminal known to work for Silas, were found in the boat. It seemed Silas was using his connections within the city's underbelly to further his escape. The trail went cold again, but Ava refused to give up. She delved deeper into Silas's past, poring over his psychiatric records, searching for any clue, any weakness that could give her an edge. She learned about his troubled childhood, his history of psychological trauma, his manipulative tendencies, and his fascination with creating chaos. Meanwhile, Silas was meticulously planning his next move. He'd anticipated Ava's relentless pursuit, anticipating her every move. He'd prepared a series of contingencies, a series of backup plans, each designed to evade capture. He'd even prepared for the unexpected, betrayals, double crosses, and unforeseen circumstances. He contacted Viper, his voice a low whisper over an encrypted line. "Ava's getting closer," he said, his tone devoid of emotion. "She's sharp. We need to be more careful." Viper, her loyalty secured by Silas's generous payouts, agreed, but a flicker of doubt crossed her mind. The thrill of the chase was exhilarating, but the risks were increasing exponentially. She wondered how much longer she could maintain this precarious alliance, how much longer she could walk the tightrope without falling into the abyss. Silas, however, remained unflappable. He was a master of control, a puppeteer pulling the strings, ensuring that every piece on his board fell precisely where he intended. He knew that Viper was unreliable, that Fixer was motivated by intellectual curiosity rather than loyalty, that everyone involved was a potential liability. He had contingency plans to account for every possible betrayal. The chase led to a tense standoff in a dilapidated warehouse on the city's outskirts. Ava and her team surrounded the building, their weapons drawn, their nerves stretched taut. Inside, Silas played a deadly game of cat and mouse, using the warehouse's maze-like structure to his advantage. He moved through the shadows, his movements precise and silent, evading capture by a hair's breadth. In a moment of intense suspense, Ava cornered Silas in a dimly lit storage room. He stood facing her, his eyes cold, calculating, a ghost illuminated by a single, flickering bulb. For a moment, they were locked in a silent battle of wills, a deadly dance between hunter and hunted. He smirked, daring her to make the first move. Just as Ava reached for her weapon, Silas triggered a hidden alarm. The warehouse's security system, hacked and reprogrammed by Fixer, malfunctioned, sending smoke billowing from vents and disabling lights. In the ensuing chaos, Silas vanished, leaving Ava and her team disoriented and frustrated. He'd escaped again, slipping through their fingers like sand. The near capture served as a stark reminder of Silas's cunning, his ability to anticipate and counter their every move. He was a master of deception, a virtuoso of manipulation, and Ava knew that catching him would require more than just skill and determination. It demanded a deep understanding of his psychology, his motivations, his perverse game. The game was far from over. In fact, it had just begun in earnest. Ava knew that the chase was not just about capturing a fugitive, but about understanding the twisted mind that was behind it all, and in doing so, hopefully winning the game. The acrid smell of burnt wiring hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of Silas's near-miss escape. Ava felt the familiar sting of failure, a bitter taste she knew all too well. But this was different. This wasn't just a clever evasion. It was a calculated maneuver, a deliberate act designed to sow chaos and confusion. The malfunctioning security system wasn't a simple technical glitch, it was a deliberate act of sabotage. The following day, amidst the wreckage of the warehouse, a small, almost insignificant detail caught Ava's eye. A single, blood-stained playing card, the Queen of Spades, lay discarded near a ventilation shaft. It was a subtle clue, almost imperceptible, yet it spoke volumes. The Queen of Spades wasn't just any card. It was Silas's calling card, his signature mark, a symbol that had appeared in several of the cryptic messages he'd left. But this one was different. It was stained with a fresh crimson smear, not the old dried blood from the dockyard incident. This was new, recent. A fresh victim. This discovery threw Ava's carefully constructed theory into disarray. It suggested a new layer of complexity to the game, a dimension she hadn't anticipated. Silas wasn't just running, he was creating a diversion, a smokescreen to conceal something far more sinister. The lab analysis confirmed Ava's suspicions. The blood belonged to Fixer, the tech whiz, the supposed mastermind behind Silas's digital ghost. Fixer had been betrayed, sacrificed as a pawn in Silas's larger game. This was no ordinary escape, this was a calculated act of revenge. The betrayal sent shockwaves through Ava's team. Fixer, with his seemingly unshakable loyalty and undeniable skill, had been the linchpin of their investigation. His sudden demise forced a complete reevaluation of every assumption, every lead they'd pursued. The carefully constructed narrative of a simple escape had crumbled, revealing a far more complex and disturbing reality. Ava delved deeper into Fixer's past, exploring his seemingly spotless record, searching for the hidden cracks, the unseen motives. She uncovered a dark secret, a hidden past involving a series of unsolved cybercrimes, crimes that bore a striking resemblance to Silas's methods. The trail of digital breadcrumbs Fixer had left behind was not entirely for Silas's benefit, it was also a carefully laid roadmap leading to his own hidden agenda. It turned out Fixer hadn't been a loyal accomplice, he'd been a double agent, playing both sides, manipulating Silas while secretly pursuing his own nefarious aims. Silas, it seemed, had been merely a tool in Fixer's far-reaching scheme. Fixer's true motive, however, remained shrouded in mystery. His obsession with Silas's methods wasn't solely about criminal collaboration, it was a disturbing fascination, an admiration bordering on worship. The investigation now took a sharp turn, pivoting from the pursuit of a fugitive to the unraveling of a far more intricate and dangerous conspiracy. Ava realized that she had been playing a game of chess with two masters, each manipulating her, using her as their pawn. Ava's renewed focus shifted to understanding Fixer's motives. His meticulously crafted digital footprint revealed a pattern, a series of coded messages embedded within his seemingly innocent online activities. These messages, initially overlooked, now took on a new significance. They hinted at a far-reaching conspiracy, a network far larger than anyone had ever imagined. A network involving not just criminals but influential figures in the city's elite, individuals who had been manipulating the system from the shadows for years. The Queen of Spades, the blood, the betrayal, they were all carefully orchestrated parts of a larger plan. Fixer's death wasn't accidental, it was a warning, a message to those who had been complicit in his schemes. It was also a challenge to Ava, a dare to unravel the web of deceit that Fixer had woven. The investigation became a race against time. Ava had to move quickly, to unravel Fixer's conspiracy before it caused irreparable harm. She worked tirelessly, piecing together the fragments of information, the cryptic messages, the hidden connections. The pieces started to fall into place, revealing a picture that was far more disturbing than she ever could have imagined. She discovered that Fixer's goal wasn't merely financial gain or political influence. He harbored a deep-seated hatred for the institution that had wronged him, the Nutt House. He saw Silas's escape not as a criminal act, but as an opportunity, a means to dismantle the corrupt system from the inside. He had used Silas, manipulated him, and ultimately betrayed him, all to achieve his own twisted form of justice. Silas, meanwhile, had become a ghost again, disappearing into the city's underbelly. But his actions, however, were far from random. His erratic behavior, his seemingly nonsensical moves, all pointed toward a larger objective, one that only Ava could now fully grasp. The climax of the narrative was a confrontation not just with Silas but with the very nature of justice itself. Ava was caught in a web of deceit, where every action had a reaction, every alliance could shatter, and every truth was subject to manipulation. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had been chasing a phantom, only to discover a labyrinth of far deeper conspiracies. The final scene took place in the heart of the city, in a hidden chamber beneath the Nutt House itself. Here, Ava discovered Fixer's final message, a digital testament to his warped vision of justice. The message didn't contain the names of those involved in his conspiracy but instead provided coordinates leading to a hidden archive of documents containing irrefutable evidence of systemic corruption and abuse within the Nutt House and beyond. It was the ultimate exposé, a testament to his meticulous planning and a final act of defiance. As Ava stared at the screen, the final message displayed a single image, the Queen of Spades, not bloodstained, but pristine, perfectly rendered in digital form. The screen flickered, then went black, leaving Ava in the chilling silence of a room brimming with secrets, the weight of the truth pressing down on her like a physical burden. She was no longer hunting a single fugitive, she was confronting the dark underbelly of power and corruption, and the battle for justice had only just begun. The chase was over, but the fight had just begun. The final page turned, leaving the reader with the lingering question, would Ava expose the truth, or would the conspiracy continue to fester in the shadows? The suspense was palpable, a bitter taste left on the tongue. The game, it seemed, had only just begun. Chapter 3, Twisted Allegiances. The Queen of Spades. It haunted Ava's dreams, a stark, crimson stain against the stark white of the playing card. Fixer's death, a brutal punctuation mark in Silas's escape, had cracked open a chasm revealing a conspiracy far deeper and more insidious than she'd ever imagined. The escape hadn't been a simple flight, it was a meticulously orchestrated diversion, a smokescreen to conceal something far more sinister. Silas, the seemingly unpredictable madman, was now a pawn in a larger game, his every move meticulously planned, his chaos a deliberate strategy. Ava's team, initially focused on apprehending Silas, now found themselves entangled in a web of deceit, a labyrinthine plot involving figures far beyond the confines of the Nutt House. The initial investigation had focused on Silas's digital footprint, the intricate network of encrypted messages and hacked systems. Fixer, with his mastery of technology, had been the key, the supposed architect of Silas's digital ghost. But his death had revealed a hidden layer of complexity, a truth more chilling than any mere escape. The first crack in the facade came from an unexpected source, a disgruntled former employee of the Nutt House, a nurse named Evelyn Reed. Evelyn, harboring a simmering resentment towards the institution's corrupt administration, had stumbled upon a series of encrypted files during her time at the facility. These files, initially dismissed as meaningless technical jargon, were now being re-examined with renewed urgency. They hinted at a network of illicit activities, a trail of financial transactions that led far beyond the walls of the institution. These weren't petty bribes or small-scale embezzlements. They suggested a systematic draining of funds, a vast conspiracy involving high-ranking officials and influential figures within the city's power structure. Evelyn's testimony painted a portrait of systemic corruption, a rot that had festered for years, feeding on the institution's vulnerability. She spoke of hushed meetings, coded conversations, and a pervasive atmosphere of fear that stifled dissent. She detailed how the Nutt House, ostensibly a place of healing and rehabilitation, had become a breeding ground for corruption and abuse, a carefully constructed facade concealing a dark and malevolent heart. She described the institution's director, Dr. Albright, not as a benevolent caregiver but as a ruthless manipulator, a puppet master pulling the strings of a complex web of deceit. Evelyn's revelations were corroborated by another witness, a former patient, a man named Marcus Thorne, who had been discharged from the Nutt House several years prior. Marcus, diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, possessed a sharp intellect and an uncanny ability to piece together fragmented information. He claimed to have witnessed Dr. Albright engaging in clandestine meetings with several prominent city officials, meetings that took place in a hidden chamber beneath the Nutt House, a space Evelyn herself had unwittingly stumbled upon during her own time at the facility. The hidden chamber, a chilling discovery, became the new focal point of the investigation. Ava's team, armed with a warrant, descended into the subterranean depths of the institution, cautiously navigating a network of dimly lit tunnels and forgotten corridors. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, a stark reminder of the secrets hidden within these walls. The chamber itself was surprisingly sophisticated, a technological marvel disguised as a forgotten utility room. Inside, they found a vast server farm, pulsing with the hum of countless hard drives, each containing a mountain of data. This wasn't just a collection of random files. It was a carefully curated archive of documents, financial records, and encrypted communications, all pointing towards a far-reaching conspiracy. The data revealed a shocking truth. The Nutt House wasn't merely a corrupt institution, it was a front, a carefully constructed facade concealing a vast money-laundering operation, a sophisticated scheme that had been funneling millions of dollars into offshore accounts. The city's elite, the very people who were supposed to be safeguarding its citizens, were implicated in this conspiracy, their names appearing repeatedly in the encrypted communications, their signatures interwoven within the complex web of financial transactions. But the most shocking revelation concerned Silas. His escape wasn't a random act of violence, it was a deliberate maneuver, orchestrated by a far more powerful force than he could ever have imagined. Silas was a distraction, a red herring designed to divert attention from the true perpetrators, a pawn in a far larger game of power and control. Further analysis of the data revealed the presence of a mysterious organization, a shadowy group known only as the Syndicate. The Syndicate, according to the documents, was a network of influential individuals operating in the shadows, manipulating political processes, influencing legislation, and using the Nutt House as a means of laundering money and silencing dissent. The Syndicate's reach extended far beyond the city's borders, its tentacles wrapped around numerous institutions, including law enforcement, the judiciary, and even parts of the media. The encrypted communications suggested that Silas had unwittingly become entangled in the Syndicate's operations, his skills as a master manipulator and his connections within the criminal underworld making him a valuable asset. He had been used, exploited, and ultimately betrayed, his escape a desperate attempt to break free from their control. Ava, now grappling with the enormity of the conspiracy, realized that the chase for Silas had been a deliberate diversion, a carefully orchestrated game designed to lead her astray. The real game, a far more dangerous and consequential one, had only just begun. The pursuit of justice had transformed into a confrontation with a force far more formidable than any single criminal mastermind. The Syndicate, shrouded in mystery and wielding immense power, posed a threat not only to the city but to the very fabric of its governance. Ava, armed with the evidence, faced a daunting challenge. Exposing the syndicate would mean confronting some of the most powerful and influential people in the city, individuals who would stop at nothing to protect their interests. She was no longer hunting a fugitive, she was waging war against a formidable enemy, an enemy that operated in the shadows, wielding the levers of power to protect its own interests. The fight for justice had evolved from a manhunt to a full-blown war against the shadowy empire known only as the Syndicate. The game, she knew, had only just begun, and the stakes had just been raised considerably. The Queen of Spades, once a symbol of Silas's chaos, now represented the chilling reality of a conspiracy that reached into the highest echelons of power, a conspiracy that threatened to consume the very soul of the city. And Ava, the tireless detective, found herself standing alone on the precipice of a war that would test the limits of her courage and her commitment to justice. The consequences of failure were unthinkable. The biting wind whipped at Silas's threadbare coat as he navigated the labyrinthine alleys, the city's neon glow reflecting in the rain-slicked streets. He wasn't just running, he was orchestrating a symphony of chaos, each step meticulously planned, each action a brushstroke in a larger masterpiece of deception. His escape from the Nutt House hadn't been a desperate flight for freedom, it was a calculated move, a carefully orchestrated act of defiance against a system that had systematically broken him. Flashbacks pierced through the present, taking him back to his childhood, a tapestry woven with neglect and abuse. The orphanage, a cold, impersonal institution, had become his first prison. He learned early on that the only way to survive was to manipulate, to control, to become a master of deception. He honed his skills, transforming his vulnerability into a weapon, using his charm and wit to disarm those who would seek to harm him. He was a chameleon, adapting to his environment, blending seamlessly into the shadows. He learned to read people, to anticipate their moves, to exploit their weaknesses. His time at the Nutt House was no different. He'd played the part of the unpredictable madman, the chaotic force, meticulously cultivating an image designed to mask his true intentions. But beneath the surface of madness lay a razor-sharp intellect, a mind capable of intricate planning and execution. He'd spent months observing, studying, learning the routines of the guards, the patterns of the staff, the blind spots in the institution's security system. He'd befriended Fixer, recognizing the value of the tech expert's skills, using his technological prowess to create a digital smokescreen, a labyrinth of encrypted messages and false trails designed to throw the authorities off his scent. Fixer, however, had been more than a tool, he had become an unexpected confidant, a fellow outcast who understood the pain of betrayal and the hunger for revenge. Their bond, forged in the crucible of shared trauma, had been surprisingly strong, a testament to their shared understanding of the human condition's darker aspects. Fixer's death had been a blow, a jarring reminder of the fragility of alliances in a world governed by self-preservation. It had served as a catalyst, pushing Silas to accelerate his plans. The escape was only the first act in a far more ambitious play. His true motive wasn't merely freedom, it was retribution. He sought to expose the rot at the heart of the Nutt House, to dismantle the system that had preyed upon the vulnerable, the forgotten, the marginalized. The institution wasn't just a place of confinement, it was a breeding ground for corruption, a nexus of power and control. He knew the secrets it held, the dark deals it had brokered, the lives it had destroyed. His internal monologue was a relentless torrent of thoughts, a stream of consciousness that exposed his past traumas and his burning desire for vengeance. He remembered the faces of the patients, the victims of Dr. Albright's cruelty, the individuals who had been discarded like broken toys. He had witnessed firsthand the systemic abuse, the lack of care, the pervasive indifference. His anger fueled his actions, propelling him forward, pushing him to uncover the truth and expose the perpetrators. Silas's plan wasn't simply about exposing the Nutt House, it extended far beyond its walls. He'd discovered a far deeper conspiracy, a network of influence and corruption that reached into the highest echelons of power. He'd stumbled upon evidence of a vast money laundering scheme, a clandestine operation that involved prominent city officials and influential figures within the city's power structure. The Nutt House had become a pawn, a front for a much larger, more sinister game. He'd used his escape as a diversion, a smokescreen to conceal his true objective. The authorities were chasing a phantom, fixated on apprehending a single man while the real threat remained concealed in plain sight. He knew that exposing the truth would require more than just revealing the corruption within the Nutt House. It would mean challenging the very foundations of power. His movements were precise, almost balletic. He moved through the city like a ghost, leaving no trace, always one step ahead of his pursuers. He used his knowledge of the city's underbelly, his contacts within the criminal underworld, to navigate the labyrinthine streets, evading capture with an ease that bordered on the supernatural. He used the media, manipulating the narrative to his advantage, crafting a public image designed to sow doubt and confusion. His actions, initially perceived as acts of random violence, were carefully calculated maneuvers, designed to create chaos and distraction. He planted false leads, sending the authorities on wild goose chases while he meticulously gathered evidence. But beneath the veneer of calculated chaos lay a deep-seated loneliness, a profound sense of isolation. The flashbacks continued, revealing glimpses into his past, moments of profound vulnerability. Despite his manipulative skills, he remained a deeply wounded individual, a victim of a system that had failed him. As the night wore on, he found himself in a secluded warehouse, a hidden haven in the city's industrial heartland. It was here, surrounded by the detritus of forgotten dreams, that the final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. He discovered a hidden document, a single sheet of paper tucked away within a forgotten filing cabinet. The document contained a shocking revelation. Silas wasn't who he claimed to be. His identity was a carefully constructed facade, a mask he had worn for years. His real name, a name buried deep within his past, was a key to unlocking the truth about the conspiracy he had stumbled upon. The name sent a jolt through him, a wave of unexpected recognition. This wasn't just about revenge, this was about something far greater than himself. This was about justice. This wasn't just an escape, it was a revolution. He was no longer simply a pawn in a larger game, he was its architect. His true motives, hidden beneath layers of deception, were now revealed, to expose a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of power, to bring down the corrupt system that had crushed him and countless others, and to finally claim his true identity. The city was about to learn who Silas truly was, and the consequences of that revelation would be far-reaching and deeply unsettling. The game had only just begun. The Queen of Spades held more secrets than anyone could have imagined. And Silas, the master manipulator, held all the cards. The warehouse air hung thick with the metallic tang of rust and decay, a fitting backdrop for the turmoil brewing within Silas. He clutched the crumpled document, the paper brittle with age, the ink faded but the words starkly clear. They spoke of a past he had buried deep, a past he'd meticulously constructed a life to escape. The name, Elias Thorne, felt alien yet familiar, a phantom limb aching with a forgotten history. His reflection in the grimy windowpane was a stranger, a man haunted by shadows and shaped by the cruelty of others. The flashbacks intensified, a relentless barrage of memories assaulting his senses. He saw himself again, a small boy huddled in the corner of a cold, damp room in the orphanage, the echoes of neglect and abuse still ringing in his ears. The matron's harsh voice, the sting of her hand, the chilling indifference of the staff, these were the building blocks of his world, the foundation upon which he built his defenses. He learned to mimic, to manipulate, to become a shadow, blending seamlessly into the cracks of a system designed to break him. He learned that vulnerability was a weakness, a fatal flaw to be eradicated. The orphanage wasn't just a place, it was a crucible, forging him in the fires of adversity. He learned to read people, to predict their reactions, to exploit their weaknesses. It was a brutal education, one that stripped away his innocence and replaced it with a hardened shell of pragmatism. He was a predator in a world of prey, his survival dependent on his ability to outwit, outmaneuver, and outlast. He thrived in the chaos, the turmoil, embracing it as a means to control his surroundings. The Nutt House was a different kind of prison, a more sophisticated cage, but the rules of survival remained the same. He'd observed, analyzed, and adapted, playing the part of the volatile patient, meticulously concealing his true nature beneath a mask of erratic behavior. He'd befriended Fixer, recognizing the value of his technological skills, but their bond had been forged in the crucible of shared trauma, a recognition of their mutual outcast status. Fixer's death had been a blow, a stark reminder of the fragility of alliances and the ultimate necessity of self-preservation. But the death of Fixer had also solidified his resolve. It wasn't just about personal revenge anymore, it was about a larger purpose, a crusade against a system that fostered such cruelty and corruption. He remembered the faces of his fellow inmates, the victims of Dr. Albright's sadistic experiments, the individuals discarded like broken toys. The memories fueled his anger, his desire for justice. He wasn't just escaping, he was fighting. His escape was not a reckless act but a meticulously planned operation. He had used his knowledge of the institution's vulnerabilities, exploiting the blind spots in their security systems, the flaws in their protocols. The digital smokescreen provided by Fixer had bought him the necessary time, allowing him to create a diversion, drawing attention away from his true objectives. The media frenzy surrounding his escape was exactly what he wanted. It masked his real intentions, creating a chaotic distraction that allowed him to operate undetected. He used his knowledge of the city's underbelly, navigating the labyrinthine streets and forging alliances with unexpected allies, people who, like him, were marginalized and underestimated. He knew the dark corners of the city, the hidden networks, the pathways that only a seasoned survivor of the underworld could know. Each step was calculated, each move precise. He wasn't simply running, he was conducting an intricate dance, leading the authorities on a chase that would ultimately expose the truth. He knew that the conspiracy ran much deeper than the walls of the Nutt House. He had discovered the link to the city's power structure, the labyrinthine web of corruption that reached into the highest echelons of society. The money laundering scheme, the manipulation of power, the systemic abuse, it was a tapestry woven with greed, ambition, and the cold indifference of those in power. His escape had been a catalyst, a necessary first step in a far larger, more ambitious plan. The revelation contained in the document, however, had shaken him to his core. Elias Thorne. The name resonated with a profound sadness, a feeling of loss and betrayal that he had not anticipated. It was a missing piece of his past, a vital element in understanding his present actions. The past was no longer just a series of traumatic events, it was a map, guiding him towards his true identity, his true purpose. The information in the document wasn't just a connection to the larger conspiracy, it provided a deeper understanding of his own past. It revealed the truth about his origins, the secrets hidden from him, the deliberate manipulation of his life. He was not a product of chance or simple misfortune, but rather a pawn in a carefully orchestrated game of power. His life had been controlled, manipulated, and shaped by individuals who sought to exploit his abilities for their own gain. He was more than just a victim of institutional neglect, he was a victim of calculated manipulation. This knowledge filled him with both a burning rage and an unyielding resolve. The anger fueled his quest for justice, while the realization of his true identity solidified his purpose. He would not only expose the corruption within the Nutt House, he would dismantle the entire system that had orchestrated his life. The warehouse, once a haven, now felt too small to contain his burgeoning sense of purpose. His actions wouldn't be driven by revenge, though the fire of it still burned fiercely within him. Instead, it would be fueled by a desire for justice, a need to expose the truth and hold those responsible accountable. He was no longer just Elias Thorne, escaping his past. He was Silas, a force of nature determined to reshape his destiny. He carefully folded the document, placing it securely in his pocket. It was not just evidence, it was a roadmap. It held the key to unlocking not only the secrets of the Nutt House, but the secrets of his own life, secrets buried deep beneath layers of deception and manipulation. The past was not something to be escaped, but a weapon to be wielded. He would use his knowledge, his skills, his understanding of the human condition's darker aspects to bring down those responsible. The city lights beckoned outside, their glow painting the night in shades of hope and destruction. Silas stepped out into the night, his steps filled with purpose, his eyes fixed on the path ahead. The game was far from over, in fact, it was just beginning. He was no longer just running, he was hunting. And he would not rest until justice was served, his true identity reclaimed, and the system responsible for his suffering was brought to its knees. The city, oblivious to the storm gathering in the heart of its darkest alleys, was about to be awakened. Detective Miles Corbin stared at the rain-streaked window of his cramped office, the city lights blurring into a hazy, indistinct glow. The city, a concrete jungle teeming with secrets, felt more oppressive than ever. He rubbed his tired eyes, the weariness etched deep into his features, a stark contrast to the youthful ambition that once burned brightly within him. The Nutt House investigation had become a relentless vortex, pulling him deeper into a mire of deception and moral ambiguity. He'd started with a simple case, a seemingly routine escape from a psychiatric institution. Now, he was knee-deep in a conspiracy that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the city's power structure. The file on Silas, or Elias Thorne as the documents revealed, lay open on his desk, the crisp pages a stark contrast to the chaotic mess of his thoughts. He'd been a good cop, he'd always prided himself on that. He'd played by the rules, followed procedure, and believed in the system. But the system, it seemed, was rotten to the core. The evidence pointed to a web of corruption extending far beyond the walls of the Nutt House, implicating powerful figures, individuals shielded by wealth, influence, and a carefully cultivated facade of respectability. Corbin ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, the weight of his dilemma pressing down on him. He knew the truth, or at least a significant portion of it. Silas's escape wasn't a random act of violence, it was a carefully orchestrated rebellion, a calculated move designed to expose the systemic abuse within the Nutt House and, more disturbingly, the wider conspiracy it was entangled with. But proving it, that was another matter entirely. His superiors, blinded by their own ambition and self-preservation, were intent on sweeping the entire affair under the rug. They dismissed Silas as a dangerous lunatic, a threat to be neutralized, not a victim to be protected. They preferred the comfortable lie of order to the messy truth of chaos. The pressure was immense, the weight of expectation heavy on his shoulders. His career, his reputation, his very future hung in the balance. He was expected to close the case, to declare Silas a dangerous fugitive, and to let the whole unsavory mess fade into oblivion. But he couldn't. He simply couldn't. The faces of the patients haunted him, their eyes reflecting a chilling mix of fear and despair. He'd seen the evidence of Dr. Albright's experiments, the horrifying documentation of his sadistic practices, the twisted experiments on vulnerable individuals. He'd seen the scars, both physical and psychological, that those experiments had left behind. He'd witnessed the utter disregard for human life, the blatant violation of ethical boundaries, and the chilling indifference of those who had enabled it. He felt the moral weight of their suffering, a burden he couldn't bear alone. He thought about the city's elite, the individuals who had benefited from the system's corruption. The politicians, the businessmen, the socialites, all complicit in a grand scheme of deceit. The realization filled him with a bitter cynicism, a disillusionment that shook his very core. He was no longer investigating a simple escape, he was uncovering a deep-seated rot, a malignant tumor growing at the heart of the city. He remembered a conversation he'd had with a seasoned, cynical detective, a man who'd seen more than his share of darkness. The man had warned him about the dangers of pursuing the truth, about the price of justice. Sometimes, Miles, the old detective had said, his voice gravelly with experience, the system wins. Sometimes, the truth is just too inconvenient. He'd scoffed at the time, dismissing it as the jaded cynicism of a man weary from years of battling injustice. Now, he understood. The truth was a dangerous thing, and pursuing it could be a perilous undertaking. He had the evidence, compelling evidence, yet he faced a daunting uphill battle. He picked up the phone, his hand trembling slightly. He had a contact, a journalist known for his tenacity and unwavering commitment to truth. A risky move, but one he felt compelled to make. He needed to expose the truth, even if it meant risking his career, his reputation, his very life. The system might win, but he wouldn't go down without a fight. He had a duty, not just to the law, but to the victims, to the voiceless, to those who had been silenced by the powers that be. He began to dictate a message, his voice low and measured. He laid out the facts, the evidence, the undeniable truth of the conspiracy. He left nothing out, sparing no detail. He knew the risks, the potential repercussions. But he also knew that he could no longer remain silent. He could no longer be complicit in the perpetuation of injustice. He had to act, to fight for what he knew was right, even if it meant standing alone against a powerful and ruthless enemy. The call ended, leaving a profound silence in its wake. The rain continued to lash against the window, a relentless rhythm mirroring the turmoil in his heart. He was a detective, a man of the law, but he was also a human being, a man with a conscience, a man bound by a sense of morality that could not be ignored. He had chosen his path, a path fraught with danger and uncertainty. He would face the consequences, whatever they may be, knowing that he had done what he believed was right. The battle was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. And he would fight until the very end. The weight of the truth was heavy, but it was a burden he was willing to bear. Justice, he knew, demanded a fight he was prepared to wage, even if it meant sacrificing everything. He sat back in his chair, the city lights casting long shadows across his desk. The file on Silas lay open, a symbol of his relentless pursuit of justice. He wasn't just chasing a fugitive, he was hunting a truth that was far more elusive, far more dangerous, than he had ever imagined. The line between right and wrong had become blurred, the path ahead shrouded in uncertainty. But he would continue, driven by a sense of duty, a thirst for justice, and an unyielding determination to expose the truth, no matter the cost. His dilemma was a moral crossroads, a test of his character, a trial by fire. And he knew, with a chilling certainty, that he was about to face the most dangerous adversary of his career, the system itself. The game had reached its climax, and the stakes had never been higher. The biting wind whipped around Silas as he scaled the crumbling brick wall, the rusty metal ladder groaning beneath his weight. Below, the city sprawled like a malevolent beast, its myriad lights a glittering tapestry of indifference. He adjusted the worn leather satchel slung across his shoulder, its contents, his carefully assembled arsenal, weighing heavily, not just physically, but with the weight of his audacious plan. This wasn't just an escape, this was a calculated act of war. His escape from the Nutt House wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It had been meticulously planned, a chess game played against a formidable opponent, the institution itself, and the shadowy network of power that sustained it. Every detail, every contingency, had been considered, every risk meticulously weighed. He'd spent months studying the security protocols, the patterns of the guards, the blind spots in the surveillance system. He'd observed, learned, and waited for the perfect moment. And now, perched precariously on this crumbling wall, he felt the adrenaline surge, a cocktail of fear and exhilaration that fueled his resolve. His plan hinged on a dangerous gamble, exposing Dr. Albright's horrific experiments to the public, not through direct confrontation, but through carefully planted evidence that would implicate not only the doctor but the entire system that had enabled his atrocities. He knew the risks were immense. Failure meant capture, likely torture, and the absolute silencing of his truth. But success held the potential to shatter the facade of respectability that shielded the corrupt, exposing the rot at the heart of the city's elite. The satchel contained more than just incriminating evidence. Inside, nestled amongst meticulously documented files, were forged documents, cleverly crafted to mislead the authorities and throw them off his trail. He'd created a false narrative, a complex web of deception designed to point the finger at an unsuspecting patsy, a red herring so convincing it would divert the investigation for months, giving him the time he needed to make his escape and plant the seeds of his revolution. Reaching the top of the wall, Silas paused, taking a moment to survey his surroundings. The city stretched before him, a labyrinth of darkened streets and illuminated skyscrapers, a world both alluring and treacherous. He could feel the weight of expectation, the burden of his mission pressing down on him. This wasn't merely about his own survival, it was about the survival of those whose voices had been silenced, those whose suffering had been ignored. His descent was perilous, the latter swaying precariously in the wind. He moved with the practiced agility of someone accustomed to navigating dangerous terrain, his movements fluid and precise. He landed silently on the other side, melting into the shadows of the alleyway. His escape route was carefully mapped, a series of back streets and dimly lit alleys, each step calculated, each turn deliberate. He knew the city's underbelly like the back of his hand, a network of hidden passageways and secret entrances, a world of forgotten corners and shadowy figures where he could blend in unnoticed. His first target was the city's main newspaper office, a venerable institution with a reputation for investigative journalism. He'd chosen a journalist, a man known for his integrity and unwavering pursuit of the truth, a man who wouldn't be easily intimidated or swayed by pressure. He knew this was his biggest risk, the most vulnerable point in his meticulously crafted plan. If this part failed, the entire operation would crumble. The night was his cloak, the shadows his allies. He navigated the city's nocturnal labyrinth with the grace of a phantom, his footsteps silent, his presence undetected. The city's vibrant pulse, usually a source of overwhelming stimulation, was now a muted hum, a background noise to his stealthy operation. Reaching the newspaper building, he slipped inside through a rarely used service entrance, his movements like a whisper in the night. He left the satchel containing the incriminating evidence in a designated spot, a location known only to the journalist. He'd arranged a coded message to alert the journalist of the delivery, a system both discreet and foolproof. He then vanished back into the night, leaving behind a trail of meticulously planted evidence, a silent testament to his rebellion. His next move was even more audacious, a carefully planned disruption of a high-profile political event. He knew the city's elite would be there, the very individuals complicit in Dr. Albright's heinous experiments. His goal wasn't violence or destruction, it was chaos, a carefully orchestrated disruption to create a distraction, a smoke screen to cover his escape. He planned to use the chaos to his advantage, using the confusion to secure passage to a secure location, a point of no return. The event was scheduled to take place in a luxury hotel, a symbol of the city's opulence and decadence, a place where the city's elite gathered to celebrate their power and influence. He'd studied the building's blueprints, analyzing its security systems, its vulnerabilities. He knew where to strike, how to maximize the disruption while minimizing the risk. The chaos he created wasn't random, it was calculated, precise. It was a carefully choreographed performance designed to create maximum impact while maintaining his anonymity. He used smoke bombs, strategically placed to create confusion and disrupt the proceedings. He released pre-programmed drones, equipped with flashing lights and disorienting sounds, creating a spectacle of confusion and disarray. The scene descended into pandemonium. Screams filled the air as the city's elite scrambled for safety. Amidst the pandemonium, Silas slipped away, unseen, unnoticed, a ghost in the swirling chaos. His escape was a masterful display of cunning and precision, a testament to his meticulous planning and unwavering determination. He made his way to the docks, his final destination, a small, unregistered fishing boat waiting to take him away from this city, away from the clutches of those he had defied. The salt-tinged air carried the smell of the sea, a scent of freedom and escape. As the boat pulled away from the shore, the city lights receded into the distance, a distant glow against the inky blackness of the night. He looked back, watching as the sirens wailed in the distance, a mournful chorus signaling the beginning of the storm he'd unleashed. His gamble had been daring, reckless even. He'd risked everything, his freedom, his life, on a single, audacious throw of the dice. He didn't know if he'd succeeded, if his carefully laid plans would bear fruit. But as the boat sliced through the waves, he felt a strange sense of peace. He'd played his hand, and now, the game was in the hands of the city, and the forces he had dared to defy. The suspense was excruciating, a taut wire stretched to its breaking point. The narrative hung suspended, a cliffhanger poised on the edge of resolution, leaving the reader breathless, anticipating the inevitable reckoning. The city, once a symbol of oppression and deceit, was now a battleground, and Silas, the lone rebel, had thrown down the gauntlet. The consequences of his actions, both intended and unforeseen, were yet to be revealed. The game was far from over. The truth, once buried deep within the walls of the Nutt House, was now loose in the city, a dangerous creature ready to strike. Chapter 4. The Web Titans. The salt spray stung Silas's face as the small fishing boat bucked against the waves. Behind him, the city's lights were receding, a glittering mirage fading into the darkness. He'd gambled everything, played his hand, and now, the game was afoot. The peace he'd felt moments ago was quickly dissolving, replaced by a gnawing unease. The escape had been breathtakingly audacious, a symphony of calculated risks and daring maneuvers, but it was only the first act in a much larger play. The city, however, wasn't about to let him slip away so easily. The meticulously planned chaos he'd unleashed at the political event had indeed served its purpose, creating a diversion, sowing confusion, buying him precious time. But it had also alerted the authorities to the gravity of the situation, to the fact that they were dealing with someone far more cunning and resourceful than a simple escaped patient. Detective Inspector Davies, a man whose steely gaze could melt glaciers and whose patience was thinner than a wafer, was on Silas's trail. Davies, known for his relentless pursuit of justice and an almost supernatural ability to connect the dots, wasn't going to let this escapee slip through his fingers. He'd assembled a crack team, their collective expertise a force to be reckoned with. They were not just tracking an escaped lunatic, they were hunting a seasoned strategist who'd played them like a fiddle. Silas knew he couldn't afford to relax, not even for a second. Every shadow seemed to conceal a potential threat, every sound a possible pursuer. The thrill of escape was quickly fading, replaced by the chilling reality of his precarious situation. The ocean, once a symbol of freedom, now felt like a vast, unforgiving expanse, offering little respite from the relentless pursuit. The boat, a rickety vessel barely fit for purpose, was far from a guarantee of safety. It was a makeshift escape, a last-ditch effort to outrun his pursuers, not a luxurious vessel for a leisurely cruise. Silas felt the weight of his mission pressing down on him, heavier now than ever before. He knew the city's underbelly, its hidden routes, its shadowy figures, but the open sea was a different beast entirely. He reviewed his plan, checking for any unforeseen contingencies, any points of vulnerability. He'd anticipated the chase, planned the escape, but he hadn't anticipated the relentless tenacity of Detective Inspector Davies, a man who seemed to have an uncanny knack for anticipating his every move. The game had evolved, it was no longer a matter of escape, but of survival. The radio crackled to life, the captain's voice, tight with urgency, breaking through the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull. "They've spotted us, Silas. A Coast Guard cutter is approaching fast." The news hit Silas like a physical blow. He'd known it was a possibility, but the reality was still jarring. The comfortable delusion of escape shattered, replaced by the stark reality of imminent capture. His meticulously crafted plan, once a source of confidence, now felt fragile, precarious, teetering on the brink of collapse. The escape route to the fishing boat had been risky, a narrow window of opportunity, a gamble that had paid off, but only for a short time. The boat, small and easily spotted, was never intended for a long chase. It was a temporary reprieve, a fleeting moment of freedom before the inevitable confrontation. Silas knew that a showdown was unavoidable, a clash between his cunning and their overwhelming resources. His past in the Nutt House had taught him the importance of improvising, of adapting to unforeseen circumstances. His time within those walls had honed his ability to think on his feet, to anticipate, to strategize in the face of overwhelming odds. He moved swiftly, systematically dismantling the evidence of his escape, destroying anything that could directly link him to the boat or his movements. Every action was precise, deliberate, honed by years spent navigating the treacherous currents of institutionalized madness. He worked efficiently, quietly, guided by an instinct that had kept him alive for far too long. The Coast Guard cutter grew closer, its powerful engines a menacing roar in the still night. The captain's voice, now laced with panic, echoed through the radio, "They're closing in, Silas. We need to. The transmission cut out, swallowed by the static. Silas knew this was it, the end of the road, the moment of truth. He'd pushed the limits of his cunning, his endurance, his sanity. He'd outmaneuvered them for so long, but the law of diminishing returns was catching up. He'd created a web of deception, a smokescreen to cover his tracks, a diversionary tactic to buy himself time. But Davies was closing in, his pursuit relentless, his determination unwavering. The captain, his face pale with fear, pointed towards a distant storm. There. We can hide in the storm, lose them in the chaos. The storm was a tempestuous behemoth, a swirling vortex of wind and waves, a chaotic maelstrom that promised both concealment and peril. It was a high-stakes gamble, a desperate attempt to survive, an act of defiance against the unforgiving might of the authorities. Silas had always been a gambler, always lived on the edge, defying the odds, bending the rules to his will. As the boat plunged into the heart of the storm, tossed about like a toy in a tempest, Silas felt a strange sense of exhilaration. The adrenaline coursed through him, a heady cocktail of fear and excitement. This wasn't just a chase anymore, it was a battle for survival, a desperate fight against the elements and the relentless pursuit of the law. The storm was a battlefield, a swirling maelstrom of wind and waves. The boat was a tiny vessel, tossed and turned by the unforgiving might of nature. But amidst the chaos, amidst the relentless assault of wind and water, Silas found a grim satisfaction. This was where he belonged, in the heart of the storm, where the lines between sanity and madness blurred, where the boundaries of reality were fluid and unpredictable. This was his element. The storm provided the perfect cover. The raging tempest obscured their movements, masking their escape, turning the sea into a chaotic battlefield where pursuit was nearly impossible. The Coast Guard cutter, hampered by the ferocious storm, was forced to slow its pace, its powerful engines fighting a losing battle against the elements. The gap between them widened, the distance stretching, offering Silas a glimmer of hope. But the respite was temporary. Davies, resourceful and relentless, wouldn't give up so easily. He had the advantage, the backing of a powerful system, vast resources at his disposal, and the determination of a bloodhound on the scent. Silas knew this wasn't just a game of cat and mouse, it was a war of attrition, a battle of wills, a desperate fight for survival. The storm might buy him some time, but it couldn't guarantee his freedom. Through the raging tempest, Silas caught a glimpse of a faint light on the horizon. Hope, flickering but persistent, ignited within him. It was a small light, a distant beacon in the heart of the storm, but it was enough to sustain him, to give him the strength to fight on. He knew that the relentless pursuit would continue, that the authorities would never truly give up, but he was a survivor, a master of deception, a man accustomed to living on the edge. He would find a way to survive, to elude his pursuers, to find a way to achieve his goals. The storm raged, a wild, chaotic ballet of wind and waves. But within the heart of this tempest, Silas, the escaped patient, fought for his life, for his freedom, for the truth. The game was far from over, it was merely entering its most dangerous, and exhilarating, stage. The web tightened, the pursuit intensified, and Silas, with his back against the wall, or rather, tossed about in a maelstrom, found himself facing his greatest challenge yet, survival. The storm, a raging beast, offered temporary respite, a deceptive calm in the eye of the hurricane. Silas, clinging to the railing of the battered fishing boat, felt the raw power of the tempest, a mirroring of the turmoil within his own soul. The temporary alliance forged in the shadowed corners of the Nutt House, a pact built on shared desperation and a hunger for freedom, had crumbled faster than a cheap biscuit in the rain. It had begun subtly, a shift in the wind, a subtle change in the shared glances. Ezra, the hulking brute who'd served as Silas's muscle, had grown increasingly erratic, his eyes betraying a flicker of doubt, a tremor of fear. And then there was Anya, the wiry, sharp-tongued woman whose intellect had been instrumental in their escape. Her once fierce loyalty now felt brittle, laced with a chilling calculation. They had, after all, been inmates, their bonds forged in the crucible of shared madness. And now, in the face of real freedom, the cracks were widening. The radio crackled again, this time with Anya's voice, distorted and strained by the storm's fury. "Silas," it hissed, "they're onto us. Davies knows about the rendezvous point. He's got a tracker on the boat. The revelation struck Silas like a physical blow. He'd trusted Anya, relied on her cunning, believed in their shared goal. He'd underestimated the corrosive power of fear, the seductive allure of self-preservation. He'd played the game of deception, but it seemed he had been the pawn, not the master. "Who?" Silas roared into the howling wind, his voice barely audible above the storm's fury. "Ezra," the voice came back, sharp and cold. "He made a deal. He's leading them to us." The betrayal hit harder than the crashing waves. Ezra, the seemingly unshakable bulwark of their escape, had sold them out. The weight of it pressed down, a crushing burden added to the already overwhelming physical strain of battling the tempest. The shared trauma, the mutual understanding forged in the depths of the Nutt House, meant nothing in the face of survival. Self-preservation, the primal instinct that drove them all, had trumped any semblance of loyalty. The boat bucked violently, sending Silas sprawling. He scrambled back to his feet, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He was not just battling the elements, he was fighting a war on two fronts, against the relentless pursuit of the authorities and against the insidious treachery of his former allies. The storm was a reflection of the chaos within him, the turmoil of betrayal mirroring the fury of the wind and waves. Silas had always operated in the shadows, a master of manipulation, a puppet master pulling the strings of his own intricate game. But he'd underestimated the human element, the unpredictable nature of alliances forged in desperation. He'd underestimated the depth of human self-interest, the terrifying power of survival. His mind raced, calculating, strategizing, adapting. He had to change his plans, improvise, survive. He couldn't rely on anyone but himself. The trust he'd placed in Ezra and Anya, a gamble born of necessity, had backfired spectacularly. It was a harsh lesson, learned in the heart of a raging storm, a brutal reminder of the precarious nature of alliances built on shifting sands. He scanned the horizon, the raging tempest obscuring any clear view. But he wasn't looking for escape, he was looking for a weapon, a countermove, a way to turn the tables. He needed to use the betrayal to his advantage, to make the turncoats pay. His past in the Nutt House, steeped in manipulation and survival, had equipped him with a unique set of skills, a twisted arsenal of psychological warfare. He would use their own treachery against them. The radio crackled again, this time with a frantic message from the captain. "They're gaining on us, Silas. We're losing power." This wasn't just about escaping Davies anymore, it was about escaping Ezra and Anya, about outwitting those who had once been his allies. The storm raged, mirroring the psychological battle unfolding within Silas. He had to act quickly. He needed a way to outmaneuver them, to turn their betrayal into a tool of his own escape. He spotted a small, uninhabited islet in the distance, barely visible through the driving rain and waves. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was his only chance. He would use the storm to his advantage, to mask his movements, to create confusion, to sow discord among his pursuers. He needed to sow suspicion among his betrayers. With a steely resolve, he ordered the captain to steer the boat toward the islet. It was a perilous journey, a dance with death in the heart of a raging storm. But Silas was a master of calculated risks, a man who thrived in chaos. He had survived the depths of the Nutt House. This tempest was nothing compared to the emotional and psychological turmoil he had already weathered. As the boat lurched dangerously close to the rocky shore of the islet, he began to form his plan. He would use the small, hidden cove as a temporary sanctuary, a place to regroup and plan his next move. He would leverage Ezra's betrayal to turn Anya against him. He would use Anya's intelligence against her, turning her sharp mind against herself. He would play them against each other, pitting their self-interest against their shared desperation, pushing them to the brink of mutual destruction. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about a carefully orchestrated act of revenge, a cold, calculated payback for the treachery he had suffered. The boat crashed against the rocks, jarring Silas to his senses. He was alive, battered and bruised, but alive. He had survived the initial confrontation, but the game was far from over. The storm raged on, mirroring the tempest brewing within him. He had lost his allies, but he had gained something far more valuable, an unshakable resolve, a steely determination to survive and exact his revenge. The web tightened, but Silas, in the heart of the storm, was tightening it back, his eyes gleaming with a chilling, calculated fury. The game, he knew, was just beginning. The salt spray stung Silas's face, a constant reminder of his precarious situation. He'd survived the storm, the treacherous crossing to the islet a testament to his resilience, but the tempest within him raged even fiercer. The temporary sanctuary of the hidden cove offered little comfort. The jagged rocks, the relentless wind, the chilling dampness, they were all pale reflections of the turmoil in his soul. He was alone, truly alone for the first time since his escape from the Nutt House. The bitter taste of betrayal lingered, a metallic tang on his tongue. Freedom, he realized, wasn't the idyllic paradise he'd envisioned. It wasn't a sun-drenched beach, a celebratory drink, or a warm embrace. It was a cold, hard reality, a relentless struggle for survival, a constant battle against the shadows of his past and the betrayals of the present. The price of freedom, he discovered, was far steeper than he'd anticipated. He thought of the faces of his former companions, their images flickering in the flickering flames of the small fire he'd managed to build. Ezra, the hulking brute, his betrayal a stab in the back as swift and merciless as any knife. Anya, the sharp-witted manipulator, her calculated treachery a testament to her survival instincts. They had been his allies, his comrades in the shared madness of the Nutt House, yet their loyalty had crumbled under the pressure of the real world, dissolving like sugar in the rain. He ran a hand through his matted hair, the rough texture a stark contrast to the smoothness of the razor he'd used to shave his head, a desperate attempt to shed his past, to leave the Nutt House behind, to erase the ghost of his institutionalization. The scars remained, however, both physical and emotional. The deep, ragged cut across his forearm, a souvenir from a brawl within the institution's walls, throbbed a dull rhythm against the cold night air. The scars of his mind ran even deeper, etched with memories of confinement, manipulation, and the sheer, brutal reality of survival among the criminally insane. He'd escaped the physical constraints of the Nutt House, but he'd carried its darkness with him, a chilling companion that clung to him like the salt spray to his clothes. He had expected freedom to be a release, an escape from the suffocating pressure of institutional life, a chance to rebuild his life, to leave the horrors of the past behind. Instead, he found himself wrestling with a different kind of confinement, the invisible bars of paranoia, mistrust, and the ever-present threat of capture. He'd traded one cage for another, the walls of the institution replaced by the invisible walls of fear and suspicion. The escape had been exhilarating, a heady rush of adrenaline and desperation, a thrilling game of cat and mouse. But now, in the stillness of the night, the adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a bitter aftertaste of regret and self-doubt. Had it all been worth it? The risks, the sacrifices, the betrayals, had they all been necessary? He examined his motives, scrutinizing them with the same critical eye he would apply to a criminal profile. Had his escape been a desperate act of self-preservation, or a calculated attempt to prove something to himself, to prove his capacity for manipulation and resilience? He'd always thrived in the chaotic environment of the Nutt House, mastering the game of psychological warfare, using his intellect and cunning to survive. His escape, he realized now, was simply a continuation of that same game, a more complex, high-stakes version played on a larger, more unforgiving stage. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the cave walls, illuminating his weary face. He'd paid a heavy price for his freedom, the loss of trust, the weight of betrayal, the constant fear of recapture. Yet, despite the overwhelming burden, there was a defiant spark in his eyes, a flicker of unwavering resolve. He was still alive, he was still free, and he wasn't willing to give that up so easily. The emotional toll was immense. The memories of the Nutt House, of the faces of the inmates, of the constant threat of violence, they haunted him, clawing their way into his waking thoughts. He'd become adept at suppressing his emotions, compartmentalizing them, burying them deep within the recesses of his mind. But the isolation of his current situation was chipping away at those carefully constructed walls, exposing the raw vulnerability beneath. He felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him, the cumulative effect of the risks he'd taken, the sacrifices he'd made. The question of responsibility loomed large. Was he responsible for the actions of those he'd left behind? Was he responsible for the turmoil he'd created in the lives of others? His escape had been a ripple in the stagnant pond of the Nutt House, disrupting the delicate balance of power and creating a chain reaction of consequences. He was a master manipulator, a puppeteer who pulled the strings, yet he couldn't control the puppet's reactions. His actions had unintended consequences, a fact he couldn't ignore. He thought about Davies, the relentless detective pursuing him. Davies was more than just a symbol of authority, he was a reflection of society's judgment, the system trying to reclaim him, to restore order and punish him for his crimes. He was an obstacle, yes, but he also represented the very system that had imprisoned Silas, the system he defied. The fire died down to embers, casting long shadows that danced in the corners of the cave. The night grew colder, mirroring the chilling realization that his journey wasn't over, not even close. The price of freedom wasn't a single transaction, it was an ongoing negotiation, a constant struggle against the shadows of his past and the uncertainties of the future. He had escaped the Nutt House, but he had yet to escape himself, to reconcile with the darkness he carried within. The web of his escape tightened, not only by the pursuit of Davies and his former allies but by the weight of his own actions, his own choices, and the lingering question of whether the price of freedom was worth the cost. The game, he knew, was far from over. The storm had passed, but the tempest in his soul raged on. The wind howled a mournful dirge around the dilapidated lighthouse, its skeletal frame silhouetted against the bruised, twilight sky. Silas, perched precariously on a crumbling ledge overlooking the churning sea, felt a familiar chill creep up his spine, a chill that had nothing to do with the biting wind. He'd chosen this isolated perch, a dramatic stage for a confrontation he'd both anticipated and dreaded. Below, the small fishing boat bobbed restlessly, its single occupant a dark silhouette against the fading light. Detective Davies. Silas adjusted the worn leather satchel slung across his shoulder, its weight a comforting presence against the gnawing unease. Inside, nestled amongst carefully folded maps and a battered compass, was the evidence, the key to his freedom, or perhaps, the key to his downfall. He'd spent the last few days meticulously planning this encounter, studying Davies's methods, anticipating his moves, analyzing his strengths and weaknesses like a chess grandmaster studying his opponent. Davies was relentless, a bulldog with a bone, and Silas knew that this wouldn't be a simple arrest. It would be a battle of wits, a dance on the razor's edge between capture and escape. The rhythmic chug of the boat's engine grew louder, the sound cutting through the wind's lament like a knife. Davies was close. Silas felt a flicker of adrenaline, a familiar rush he'd come to associate with the high-stakes games of survival he'd mastered within the Nutt House's walls. But this game was different. This wasn't a contest amongst the clinically insane, this was a clash with the law, with society itself. Davies emerged from the boat, his silhouette stark against the darkening horizon. He was a picture of controlled intensity, his movements precise and deliberate. He wore his weariness like a badge of honor, the relentless pursuit etched into the lines of his face, the sleepless nights reflected in the steely glint of his eyes. He was a seasoned hunter, and Silas was his prey. Silas, Davies's voice cut through the wind, carrying a low, almost conversational tone that belied the intensity in his eyes. It's over. Silas smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of his lips. Is it, Davies? Or is this just the beginning? He leaned further out, the wind whipping his hair around his face, the salt spray stinging his eyes. I've been expecting you. Davies didn't respond, merely stepping closer to the base of the lighthouse, his gaze unwavering. You know you can't outrun this, Silas. The whole island's looking for you. Give yourself up, make this easy. Easy, Silas chuckled, the sound swallowed by the wind. Easy isn't in my vocabulary, detective. Besides, I've got a few things to say before this easy conclusion you envision comes to pass. He gestured to the satchel. This contains the truth, Davies. The truth about the Nutt House, about the web of deceit that runs deeper than you can imagine. Davies remained silent for a moment, his eyes narrowing. You're playing games, Silas. This is about your escape, your crimes. This truth is just a distraction. Is it? Silas countered, his voice sharp. Or is it the key to understanding why a man like me found himself trapped in a place like the Nutt House in the first place? A place where the lines between sanity and madness are blurred deliberately, a place where the staff are as culpable as the patients. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. The web you're chasing, Davies, it stretches far beyond me. It reaches into the heart of the institution itself. And I'm holding the frayed end of it. Davies shifted his weight, his hand hovering near the holster on his hip. Enough with the theatrics, Silas. This ends now. Not yet, Silas said, his voice a low growl. He opened the satchel, revealing a small, leather-bound journal and a handful of photographs. These are the missing pieces, the pieces that will expose the truth. The corruption, the cover-up. The things they don't want you to find. He tossed a photograph to Davies. It showed a group of men in crisp white coats, laughing around a table littered with glasses and empty bottles. In the background, a shadowy figure could be glimpsed, their face obscured, but their presence undeniably sinister. Davies examined the photograph, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the roar of the ocean and the mournful cry of gulls circling overhead. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Silas continued, his voice a calm counterpoint to the storm raging around them. They tried to bury the truth, Davies. They tried to silence me. But I survived. I escaped. And now, the truth is about to be unleashed. He drew a deep breath, bracing himself for whatever might come next. This was more than a showdown, it was a reckoning. Davies, finally breaking the silence, spoke in a measured tone, I'm not going to arrest you tonight, Silas. But I need you to answer some questions. Silas grinned, a wolfish gleam in his eyes. Questions are my specialty, detective. Ask away. But let's remember, I control the narrative now. The next hour unfolded as a slow burn, a masterclass in psychological sparring. Silas, with his sharp intellect and unsettling charisma, held Davies in thrall, weaving a narrative so intricate and captivating that even the seasoned detective found himself questioning everything he thought he knew. Silas meticulously laid out his case, detailing the insidious corruption that permeated the Nutt House, the systematic abuse of power, the manipulation, the cover-up. He revealed secret alliances, hidden agendas, and long-buried secrets, painting a picture far more disturbing than even Davies could have imagined. Silas's escape, it became clear, wasn't just a desperate act of self-preservation, it was a calculated move to expose the truth and bring down the system that had trapped him. He'd played the game by their rules, mastering their manipulative tactics, only to use that knowledge to turn the tables and expose their hypocrisy. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, Davies stood in a state of stunned silence, the weight of the revelation hanging heavy in the air. He knew Silas was telling the truth, the evidence undeniable. The years spent chasing Silas had led him not to a simple capture, but to a far greater truth. The game wasn't over, not by a long shot, but the rules had fundamentally changed. He had an entirely new hunt ahead of him. This time, his quarry wasn't a single escapee, but a rot that festered at the heart of a seemingly respected institution. The web, Silas had warned, was far-reaching. And as Davies finally turned to leave, the rising sun illuminated not just the rugged coastline but the immense task ahead, a task far more complex and challenging than the simple apprehension of a single fugitive. The hunt for Silas was just the beginning. The journal, Davies realized, was more than just a record of Silas's experiences, it was a meticulously crafted exposé. Each entry, initially seeming like the ramblings of a disturbed mind, revealed a chilling pattern of systemic abuse and calculated manipulation within the Nutt House. Silas had documented everything. The hushed conversations in dimly lit hallways, the coded messages slipped between patients, the subtle threats and blatant acts of intimidation. He'd even included sketches, crude but telling, depicting the inner workings of the institution's power structure, its shadowy hierarchy. The photographs, equally damning, offered visual corroboration. They weren't just snapshots of casual gatherings, they were carefully composed scenes that hinted at deeper conspiracies. One showed a doctor, Dr. Albright, the institution's seemingly benevolent director, accepting a large envelope of cash from a shadowy figure in a dark suit. Another showed Dr. Albright and several other staff members gathered around a patient, their faces obscured, but the patient's terrified expression was unmistakable. A chilling scene indeed. The implication was clear. The patients weren't merely being treated, they were being used, exploited, their suffering a commodity to be traded for profit. Silas had strategically placed himself within the heart of the institution's web of deceit, playing the role of the volatile, unpredictable patient while meticulously documenting the corruption he witnessed. He'd become a master of deception, using his own madness as a shield, absorbing information, and manipulating his environment to gather evidence. The narrative shifted. The focus was no longer simply on Silas's escape, but on the far larger, systemic corruption at the heart of the Nutt House. The institution, initially perceived as a place of healing, was revealed to be a carefully constructed cage, designed not to cure, but to control and exploit. The patients were pawns in a game far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The staff, from the seemingly benevolent director to the seemingly caring nurses, were complicit. Silas's journal detailed a complex network of financial transactions, secret meetings, and coded messages that revealed a staggering level of corruption. The money wasn't solely for personal enrichment, it funded a larger operation, one that involved the illegal experimentation on patients, the suppression of dissenting voices, and the manipulation of legal and regulatory systems. The journal uncovered a terrifying truth. The Nutt House wasn't just a place for the mentally ill, it was a criminal enterprise masquerading as a healthcare facility. Among the shocking revelations was the identity of the shadowy figure in the photographs, a powerful politician with close ties to the hospital's board. The politician, Silas revealed, had used the Nutt House as a tool for silencing political opponents and eliminating inconvenient witnesses, manipulating the institution's system to commit acts that would otherwise be unthinkable. The narrative intertwined with the lives of other patients, those Silas had interacted with during his time within the institution. Their stories, initially seemingly isolated incidents, came together to paint a grim picture of systemic abuse. Each patient's individual experience was a piece of a larger, disturbing puzzle. The jigsaw became clearer, revealing a network of exploitation and abuse protected by the walls of the seemingly respectable institution. Davies, initially focused solely on Silas's escape, now found himself embroiled in a far more significant investigation. The revelation of this systemic corruption sent shockwaves through the department, forcing him to confront the unsettling truth that those he had once trusted were complicit in a vast criminal enterprise. The hunt for Silas had become a crusade to dismantle a criminal organization operating under the guise of a charitable, public institution. Silas's detailed account revealed that the institution's staff routinely fabricated diagnoses to justify patient confinement, extending stays far beyond what was medically necessary, thus maximizing profits. The evidence revealed a pattern of inhumane treatment, of patients being subjected to experimental therapies without their consent, their suffering a means to an end. The journal also exposed a series of cover-ups and attempts to silence anyone who dared to question the institution's practices. Whistleblowers, patients who attempted to expose the truth, were systematically silenced through intimidation, threats, and even violence. Silas described instances where patients who had been close to uncovering the truth mysteriously disappeared, their fate left ambiguous but ominous. The truth painted a horrifying picture of systematic abuse masked by the facade of clinical care. Davies, armed with the journal and photographs, embarked on a new investigation. The initial focus was on Silas's escape shifted to a relentless pursuit of justice. He interrogated staff members, some of whom broke under pressure, confessing their roles in the conspiracy and providing further evidence of the corruption that had plagued the institution. The investigation unearthed a network of financial records, forged documents, and falsified medical reports. The evidence painted a clear picture of systematic fraud, abuse of power, and a ruthless campaign to silence anyone who dared to challenge the system. The scale of the conspiracy was breathtaking. As the investigation progressed, unexpected twists emerged, adding further layers of complexity to the narrative. Alliances shifted, loyalties were tested, and long-buried secrets were brought to light. The truth, once revealed, shattered the carefully constructed facade of the Nutt House, exposing a system built on lies and fueled by greed and power. The final confrontation wasn't a physical battle, but a psychological one. Silas, from his secluded vantage point, had anticipated this, prepared for the consequences. He'd laid out the evidence, meticulously detailed, irrefutable. His actions, initially perceived as the desperate acts of a fugitive, were revealed to be part of a calculated plan to expose the truth, to bring down the entire rotten system. The novel ends not with Silas's capture or escape, but with the dismantling of the Nutt House, with the arrest of numerous staff members, and with the exposure of the corrupt politician who had used the institution as his tool. The story closes with Davies, haunted by the horrors he has uncovered, looking ahead to a new phase in his career, one that will never be the same. He had pursued a criminal, but he had stumbled upon something far greater, far more disturbing, an institutionalized conspiracy that had thrived under the guise of compassion. His hunt for Silas was now a part of a much larger, ongoing investigation, the truth now unleashed, its ripples spreading far beyond the confines of the Nutt House, leaving an indelible mark on the lives of all involved. The web, though severed, left its mark on the landscape, a testament to the darkness that could lurk beneath the surface of seemingly respectable institutions. Chapter 5. Reckoning. The arrest of Dr. Albright was anticlimactic, almost underwhelming. He didn't scream, didn't fight, didn't even seem surprised. He simply slumped against the cold steel of the interrogation room table, his meticulously groomed hair askew, his eyes holding a chilling emptiness that spoke volumes more than any confession ever could. He'd played the role of the benevolent director for so long, the mask of compassion so expertly crafted, that even now, facing irrefutable evidence of his depravity, a faint aura of respectability clung to him. The other staff members, however, offered a different spectacle. Some crumbled under the weight of Davies' relentless questioning, their carefully constructed facades dissolving into a torrent of tears and half-truths. Others, the hardened ones, the ones who had inflicted the most harm, adopted a defiant posture, clinging to a desperate hope of escaping accountability. Their arrogance was a stark contrast to Albright's unsettling calm, a chilling testament to the depths of their depravity. One nurse, a woman Davies had once considered a friend, broke down completely, confessing not just her participation, but the chilling details of her own acts of cruelty, her words dripping with a remorse so profound it bordered on self-flagellation. She described the silent screams, the vacant stares of the patients subjected to their experiments, the casual brutality that had become the norm within the institution's walls. The politician, Senator Harding, proved to be a far tougher nut to crack. Protected by layers of legal maneuvering and political influence, he initially denied everything, his carefully crafted public image of a pillar of the community seemingly impenetrable. But Davies, armed with Silas's meticulously documented evidence, slowly chipped away at Harding's defenses. The damning photographs, the incriminating financial records, the testimonies of terrified former patients, they formed an undeniable chain of evidence, a relentless hammer blow against the senator's carefully constructed facade of respectability. The evidence was not just circumstantial, it was direct, undeniable, and devastating. Harding's downfall wasn't a matter of proving guilt, it was a matter of meticulously dismantling his elaborate web of lies. The trial was a media circus, a spectacle that captivated the nation. The Nutt House, once a symbol of compassionate care, was transformed into a symbol of systemic corruption and abuse. The public outcry was deafening, demanding justice not only for the victims but also for the erosion of public trust in institutions that were supposed to protect the vulnerable. The legal battles were arduous, complex, and deeply frustrating. The defense teams, expertly assembled and generously funded, used every legal tactic imaginable to delay, obfuscate, and ultimately, to minimize the sentences handed down. They exploited loopholes, appealed judgments, and questioned the credibility of witnesses, turning the process into a relentless game of attrition. Davies watched, feeling the creeping weight of disillusionment as the system, designed to deliver justice, seemed to bend and break under the pressure of wealth and influence. While Albright and several key members of the staff received lengthy prison sentences, the victories felt hollow. The sentences felt inadequate, a pale reflection of the suffering they had inflicted. Harding, despite the overwhelming evidence against him, was ultimately acquitted on a technicality. He left the courthouse to a chorus of boos and jeers, his reputation in tatters, but his freedom intact, a bitter pill for Davies and the families of the victims to swallow. The system had delivered a semblance of justice, but it felt like a Pyrrhic victory, a testament to the power of money and influence over truth and justice. The experience left Davies profoundly shaken. The depth of the conspiracy, the scale of the cruelty, the lengths to which those in power would go to protect themselves, it had left an indelible mark on his soul. He had started his career with a simple goal, to catch a criminal. He had ended up fighting a far more formidable enemy, a system itself. He had pursued justice, but the justice he found was tinged with a profound sense of unease, a chilling awareness of the inherent limitations of the very system he had sworn to uphold. Silas, meanwhile, remained elusive. His escape, while initially the focus of the investigation, was overshadowed by the revelations that followed. Davies never tracked him down. The trail went cold, disappearing into the labyrinthine alleys of the city. He wondered about Silas, about his motivations, about the future. Was he enjoying his freedom? Was he safe? Or was he, like Davies, forever marked by the horrors of the Nutt House? The Nutt House itself was shut down, its once imposing structure now standing as a chilling monument to the darkness it had harbored. The land remained untouched, haunted by the ghosts of the patients, a silent reminder of the systematic abuse that had occurred within those walls. The closure brought a sense of finality, a closure that was both necessary and deeply unsettling. The aftermath of the investigation was as complex and emotionally taxing as the investigation itself. The patients, having endured years of abuse, struggled to rebuild their lives. Many remained deeply traumatized, struggling with the psychological scars of their confinement. The institution had promised healing, but had instead delivered profound trauma. Their recovery was a long, arduous journey, filled with moments of hope and despair. Some were able to find solace and rehabilitation, while others remained broken, lost in the maze of their own pain. Davies struggled to reconcile his professional life with the personal toll the investigation had taken. He became haunted by the faces of the victims, the haunting echoes of their suffering echoing in his memory. The investigation had changed him. He found it hard to trust, to believe in the inherent goodness of institutions, or the unfailing promise of justice. The novel ends not with a neat resolution, but with a lingering sense of ambiguity. Justice had been served in a certain sense, but the true reckoning was yet to come. The scars remained, both physical and psychological. The system was imperfect, flawed, and capable of both great good and profound evil. The Nutt House was closed, but the legacy of its cruelty continued to haunt those who had been touched by it. The final image is one of lingering unease, a reflection on the enduring power of trauma, and the enduring fragility of justice itself, a reminder that the shadows of the past can continue to linger long after the final page is turned. The story, ultimately, is not just about the victims and perpetrators, but about the nature of justice, its limitations, and the enduring struggle for truth in a world where darkness can easily masquerade as light. The fight for justice, Davies knew, was a never-ending battle. A battle waged not just in courtrooms, but in the hearts and minds of those who bear the scars of systemic abuse. The Nutt House stood silent, a skeletal monument to a shattered system. Its windows, once gleaming, were now dark and vacant, reflecting the bleak sky like empty eyes. The grounds, once manicured and pristine, were overgrown with weeds, a visual metaphor for the neglect and decay that had festered within its walls. Even the air seemed heavy, thick with the lingering scent of antiseptic and despair, a phantom perfume of past horrors. The official closure brought a sense of relief, a palpable sigh of collective exhalation from the community, yet it also ushered in a chilling emptiness, a stark reminder of the lives irrevocably altered by the institution's cruelty. For the patients, the aftermath was a slow, agonizing climb out of the abyss. The physical scars, the welts and bruises, faded with time, but the psychological wounds proved far more resilient. Many found themselves adrift in a world that felt both alien and hostile. The routines, the structure, the very sense of order that the Nutt House had imposed, however harshly, had become their anchor. Now, unmoored and adrift, they struggled to navigate the complexities of everyday life. Simple tasks, things most people took for granted, became monumental struggles. Sleep became a battlefield, haunted by nightmares and flashbacks, the faces of their tormentors, their own terrified reflections in the sterile white of the institution's walls, became unwilling guests in their minds. Therapy offered some solace, a fragile lifeline in a sea of turmoil. But for many, the damage was too profound, the trauma too deeply embedded to be easily eradicated. They were haunted by the echoes of screams, the chilling whispers of madness, the indelible stain of institutionalized abuse. Some found refuge in support groups, finding comfort and understanding in the shared experiences of others, a fragile solidarity born out of collective trauma. Others retreated into themselves, building walls around their hearts, shielding themselves from a world they feared would only repeat the horrors they had endured. The system had failed them, and the lingering distrust, the deep-seated fear of authority, made rebuilding their trust in society a Herculean task. The families of the patients bore their own silent burdens. The years of uncertainty, the agonizing wait for answers, the endless cycle of hope and despair had taken their toll. The reunion with their loved ones was not the joyous occasion they had envisioned. The loved ones returned different, changed, scarred not just physically, but emotionally and mentally, their innocence irrevocably stolen by the heartless machinations of the Nutt House. Many were left to navigate the complexities of their loved ones' recovery alone, burdened with the emotional and financial strains of long-term care. Their fight for justice had ended, but their battles were far from over. The scars of the past were not just theirs to heal, they were the collective responsibility of a society that had failed to protect its most vulnerable. Silas's actions, initially viewed as a catalyst for the unraveling of the Nutt House's dark secrets, cast a long shadow over the aftermath. While his escape had been overshadowed by the larger scandal, his presence, or rather, his absence, remained a haunting enigma. His meticulous planning, his ability to manipulate and deceive, spoke to a level of cunning that both unnerved and fascinated Davies. Was Silas a victim, driven to desperation by the horrors he had endured? Or was he a predator, using the chaos of the institution as a springboard for his own twisted agenda? The question remained unanswered, a lingering mystery that served as a chilling reminder of the unpredictable nature of the human psyche and the chilling depths of human depravity. His escape was a symbol, a testament to the inherent flaws in a system designed to contain, but ultimately unable to truly understand, the complexities of madness. The ambiguity surrounding his motives only amplified the feeling of unease, the lingering sense of incompleteness that permeated the aftermath of the Nutt House scandal. The media circus that had surrounded the trial gradually subsided, but the public's attention, while shifted, remained fixated on the larger issue of institutional accountability. The Nutt House's story served as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the potential for abuse within seemingly benevolent institutions. The calls for reform were deafening, demanding greater oversight, stricter regulations, and an enhanced focus on patient rights and protections. Investigations were launched into similar institutions, revealing a disturbing pattern of negligence, abuse, and systemic corruption. The Nutt House's downfall wasn't an isolated incident, it was a symptom of a deeper malaise, a systemic problem that required immediate and comprehensive reform. The public's outrage ignited a wildfire of change, pushing for increased transparency, better safeguards and a commitment to preventing future tragedies. For Davies, the aftermath wasn't a celebration of victory, but a somber reflection on the nature of justice and its limitations. The weight of the investigation, the emotional toll of witnessing such profound suffering, had profoundly changed him. He found solace not in the closure of the case, but in the quiet moments of reflection, in the attempt to reconcile the dissonance between the idealistic image of justice he had embraced and the harsh realities of the system he navigated. The shadow of the Nutt House, the ghosts of its victims, lingered in his memory, a constant reminder of the human capacity for both profound darkness and enduring resilience. The fight for justice was not about simply catching criminals, but about protecting the innocent, about holding those in power accountable, and about confronting the systemic failures that allowed institutions like the Nutt House to flourish. His career was forever altered, the line between his professional life and his personal struggles blurring. He had pursued justice, but found that it was a never-ending battle, an unending pursuit of truth in a world of shadows. The final image is not of a neatly resolved case, but of a lingering ambiguity. Justice had been served, to a degree, yet the lasting scars, both physical and emotional, remained. The Nutt House was gone, but its legacy lived on, a chilling reminder of the human capacity for both good and evil, and the fragile nature of truth and justice in a world where darkness often cloaks itself in the guise of light. The lingering question wasn't about who was guilty, but what the system had become, how the balance had tipped from healing to harm, and what steps could be taken to prevent such atrocities from ever happening again. The story was not just a thriller, it was a reflection on the human condition, its darkness and its resilience, the unending fight for justice in a system often incapable of delivering it fully. The struggle for truth, for healing, for a better tomorrow, continued long after the last page was turned. The fight continued, within each individual affected, a quiet battle waged in the shadows of memory, a quiet war for survival and peace. The scars remained, a testament to the darkness they had endured, a constant reminder of a justice only imperfectly served. But even in the darkness, a flicker of hope remained, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity and its enduring capacity for healing. The abandoned shell of the Nutt House loomed against the bruised twilight sky, a silent testament to its sordid history. Inside, the echoing emptiness was a stark contrast to the cacophony of screams and shattered lives it had once housed. The air, thick with the scent of dust and forgotten despair, held a chilling stillness, a deceptive calm that belied the storm of emotions swirling in its wake. The official closure had brought a sense of relief, but the lingering sense of unease, the unresolved questions, hung heavy in the air like a shroud. Silas's escape, initially a footnote in the larger scandal, now took center stage. His disappearance, once a puzzle piece in the larger investigation, became a symbol, a haunting metaphor for the elusive nature of justice. The police, despite their meticulous investigation, had drawn a blank. His trail, like smoke in the wind, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only whispers and speculation. Davies, still grappling with the emotional and psychological toll of the case, found himself strangely drawn to Silas's enigma. He had caught many criminals in his career, but Silas remained elusive, a ghost haunting the periphery of his consciousness. Theories abounded. Some whispered that Silas had fled the country, perhaps seeking refuge in a remote corner of the world, far from the prying eyes of the authorities. Others believed he had found a hidden sanctuary, a secret network offering support and protection to those who had escaped the clutches of the system. The more conspiratorial minds suggested a far more sinister truth, that Silas had not escaped at all, but was still within the city, lurking in the shadows, a phantom observer of the unfolding consequences of his actions. Davies, however, suspected a simpler, yet equally chilling, truth. He suspected Silas had found a way to rebuild his life, to reinvent himself. The cunning that had allowed him to orchestrate his escape was likely the same cunning that allowed him to disappear. Davies imagined Silas, shedding his former identity like a worn-out coat, adopting a new persona, a new life, far removed from the horrors of the Nutt House. He pictured him finding work, perhaps even building a family, leading a life ordinary enough to blend into the background, to become invisible. The thought, more than unsettling, was strangely poetic, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and its capacity for transformation. This was not the resolution Davies had expected. He had envisioned a dramatic confrontation, a final showdown, a clear-cut ending. But Silas's fate, though ambiguous, held a disturbing kind of finality. It wasn't the bang of a gunshot or the slam of a prison door, it was the quiet rustle of a new life beginning, a life born from the ashes of a destroyed past. This left Davies with a profound sense of unease, not because justice had not been served, but because it had been served in a way that defied expectation, a way that underscored the very unpredictability of the human spirit. The lack of a traditional conclusion amplified the lingering questions. Had Silas's escape been an act of rebellion, a desperate bid for freedom from the clutches of an oppressive system? Or was it a calculated move, a means to an end, a step toward a larger, yet unknown, objective? Was he truly a victim of the system, or was there a darker, more sinister motive at play? The ambiguity was a chilling reflection of the complexities of the human psyche, a reminder that even within the confines of madness, there lay a spectrum of motivations, and that the line between victim and perpetrator often blurred. The narrative's lack of a definitive ending served as a commentary on the limitations of justice, the way it can fail to deliver the clear-cut resolutions we crave. It was a recognition that some mysteries will remain unsolved, some wounds will never fully heal, some questions will linger long after the dust settles. Silas's escape, his disappearance, became a symbol of the inherent flaws in the system, the way it could both create and perpetuate suffering. It served as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the darkness that could fester within seemingly benevolent institutions, and the enduring capacity of the human spirit to survive, adapt, and even thrive in the face of immense adversity. The media, having initially fixated on the sensational details of the Nutt House scandal, gradually shifted their focus. Yet, the story of Silas remained a haunting undercurrent, a chilling reminder of the unresolved tensions within the system. His escape highlighted the failures of the institution, the shortcomings of the system designed to rehabilitate and heal, and its potential to inflict further trauma. It became a recurring motif in discussions about institutional reform, serving as a catalyst for change, a call for accountability, a demand for a more humane and effective approach to mental health care. The case underscored the complexities of judging intent and motive, especially in the context of severe mental illness. It challenged the simplistic binary of victim and perpetrator, forcing a deeper examination of the factors that contribute to criminal behavior, the interplay of societal neglect, systemic failures and individual choices. The ambiguous nature of Silas's fate forced a reconsideration of what justice truly means. Is it simply punishment, or is it about healing, about accountability, about preventing future tragedies? The lingering questions surrounding Silas's fate weren't just about him, they were about the entire system, about the people it affected, about the enduring consequences of institutionalized abuse. They served as a reminder of the importance of empathy, compassion, and understanding, a call for a more just and humane approach to those struggling with mental illness. Silas's story became a chilling parable, a haunting reminder of the complexities of the human condition, the fragility of justice, and the enduring power of hope, even in the darkest of times. The absence of a concrete conclusion forced a deeper reflection on the very nature of justice, a contemplation on its imperfections, its limitations, and its ultimately elusive nature. Silas's fate became a mirror reflecting the blurry line between sanity and madness, victim and perpetrator, justice and vengeance. The book ended not with a neat resolution, but with a lingering sense of unease, a stark reminder that even in the face of closure, some questions will remain unanswered. The silence surrounding Silas's disappearance became a haunting echo, a symbol of the unresolved conflicts and the enduring scars left by the Nutt House. His story served as a chilling postscript, a lingering reminder of the profound darkness and the unsettling ambiguity that remained. The story was not just about Silas, it was about the systemic failures, the lingering trauma, and the difficult journey toward healing and reconciliation, a journey far from over. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, but also a somber reflection on the human capacity for both great good and devastating evil. The ending left the reader pondering the complexities of justice, the elusive nature of truth, and the enduring shadow of the Nutt House, a building long gone, but its legacy etched forever in the collective consciousness. The final image lingered, a haunting blend of ambiguity and a quiet sense of closure, a paradox that reflected the very nature of the human condition itself. The unanswered questions echoed the unresolved pain, the silent struggles, and the unending search for justice in a world far from perfect. And in that silence, in that ambiguity, lay the chilling truth of the story, a story that stayed with you long after the last page was turned. The rain hammered against the windowpane, a relentless rhythm mirroring the persistent thrum of unease that still vibrated within Davies. He sat in his dimly lit apartment, the city lights blurring into a hazy watercolor outside, a stark contrast to the stark reality of the empty mug in his hand and the lingering emptiness in his soul. The Nutt House case, officially closed, still clung to him like a shadow, refusing to be shaken off. He'd chased ghosts, wrestled with demons, both literal and metaphorical, and emerged changed, scarred, but strangely whole. The weight of the investigation had aged him, etched lines of exhaustion around his eyes, and left a permanent furrow in his brow. He poured every ounce of his being into unraveling Silas's escape, chasing phantom leads, confronting his own inner turmoil in the process. He'd stared into the abyss, into the fractured minds of the inmates, and had glimpsed a darkness that resided not just in the Nutt House, but within the human heart. It wasn't the violence, the depravity, or the chilling acts that truly haunted him. It was the quiet desperation, the silent screams masked by smiles and forced normalcy. The media frenzy had subsided, the public's attention flitting to the next sensational headline. But for Davies, the silence was deafening, the absence of a clear resolution a constant gnawing at his conscience. He hadn't caught Silas. Silas had simply vanished. It was a victory of sorts, a testament to the elusive nature of the human spirit, but a hollow victory nonetheless. Justice, he realized, was not always about apprehending the guilty, but about confronting the truth, however unsettling it might be. The official report, a sterile document filled with clinical jargon and cold, hard facts, provided a pale imitation of the chaos and emotional turmoil he'd witnessed firsthand. It neatly packaged the case, tied it up with a bow, and filed it away, but the reality was far messier, far more complicated. He'd seen the cracks in the system, the flaws in the architecture of justice, the way societal failures could breed monsters in the most unexpected of places. The Nutt House wasn't just a building, it was a metaphor for a society that often failed its most vulnerable members, pushing them to the brink, leaving them to fend for themselves in a world that was seldom kind. Davies had entered the investigation a jaded detective, cynical and hardened by years of staring into the dark heart of human nature. He'd seen enough to make him believe that the world was fundamentally broken. But the Nutt House, with all its horrors and complexities, had shattered his cynicism, replacing it with a more nuanced understanding, a painful but necessary empathy. He'd learned that even in the darkest corners of the human psyche, glimmers of hope and resilience could persist, and that even the most damaged individuals possessed the capacity for both great evil and extraordinary acts of compassion. His colleagues, initially dismissive of his obsessive focus on Silas's escape, had come to understand, albeit reluctantly, the significance of the case. It wasn't just about catching a fugitive, it was about confronting the larger issues of institutional failure, systemic neglect, and the societal factors that contribute to mental illness. The case had forced a reassessment of the methods used in treating the mentally ill, highlighted the need for greater empathy, and pushed for reform within the system itself. Davies' transformation wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. He'd wrestled with his own demons, faced his own vulnerabilities, and emerged a better, albeit more weary, version of himself. The case had challenged his preconceived notions about sanity, madness, and the very nature of justice. He'd witnessed the blurring of lines between victim and perpetrator, the complexities of motive and intent, and the inherent limitations of the judicial system. It had forced him to confront his own biases, to acknowledge his own shortcomings, and to seek understanding rather than judgment. He'd spent countless nights poring over Silas's file, searching for clues, not just to his whereabouts but to his motivations. He'd traced Silas's fragmented past, piecing together a puzzle of neglect, abuse, and a system that failed to protect him. He saw a reflection of himself in Silas, a shared vulnerability, a shared understanding of the weight of expectations, the burden of trauma, and the enduring capacity for survival. Silas, in his own twisted way, had become a mirror reflecting Davies' own inner turmoil, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked within the human heart, but also the enduring possibility of redemption. The city outside his window was a symphony of muted sounds, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the Nutt House. But the silence within him was more profound, more pervasive, a testament to the deep scars the case had left behind. It wasn't just the physical exhaustion or the emotional toll, it was the weight of responsibility, the unanswered questions, the lingering sense of injustice that remained. He knew he'd never fully escape the shadow of the Nutt House, but he'd learn to live with it, to integrate it into the fabric of his being, transforming it from a symbol of failure into a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, both his own and Silas's. His work on the case hadn't brought him the satisfaction of a clean arrest, a definitive closure. But it had given him something far more profound, a deeper understanding of human nature, a renewed commitment to justice, and a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer the jaded detective who had entered the Nutt House. He was someone changed by the experience, a man forever marked by the darkness he had confronted, yet strengthened by his resilience, his empathy and his unwavering commitment to justice, even in its most elusive form. He'd seen the abyss, stared into the darkness, and had emerged with a hard-won wisdom, a renewed faith in the enduring human spirit. He had found peace, not in the solving of the mystery, but in the acceptance of its inherent ambiguity, the understanding that some questions remain unanswered, and that sometimes, the true victory lies not in catching the criminal, but in understanding the crime. The rain continued to fall, washing away the dust of the past, leaving behind a quiet, resolute determination. The case was closed, but Davy's journey had just begun. The echoes of the Nutt House remained, but they no longer haunted him. They guided him, a constant reminder of the darkness that exists within, and the enduring power of the human spirit to not just survive, but to ultimately thrive in the face of adversity. The quiet strength that filled him now was a testament to his growth, a silent reflection of the resilience that had sustained him through the darkness, and a silent promise to continue fighting for justice, no matter how elusive it might be. The official closure of the Nutt House case brought no sense of finality. The neatly tied bow on the official report felt like a cruel joke, a mockery of the chaos and heartbreak Davies had witnessed. Silas's escape, a phantom slipping through the cracks of the system, remained an open wound, a constant reminder of the inadequacies of justice. The media had moved on, their insatiable appetite for scandal satiated by the next sensational headline. But for Davies, the silence was deafening, a vacuum filled only by the unanswered questions that gnawed at his conscience. He'd chased shadows, wrestled with the ghosts of fractured minds, and emerged from the experience profoundly altered. The Nutt House had become a permanent fixture in his internal landscape, a haunting reminder of the fragility of sanity, the seductive nature of chaos, and the chilling ease with which society could cast its most vulnerable members aside. It wasn't the violence that haunted him, but the subtle desperation, the masked cries for help buried beneath forced smiles and carefully constructed facades. He'd seen the cracks in the system, the systemic failures that bred the monsters he'd encountered, turning the institution itself into a metaphor for a society that often failed its most vulnerable. The official narrative, a sanitized version of reality, glossed over the true complexities. It provided a convenient conclusion, a neat package for the public to consume and promptly forget. But Davies knew the truth was far messier, a tangled web of negligence, institutional apathy, and the quiet desperation of individuals trapped within a system designed to heal but ultimately failed to do so. He'd seen the blurred lines between victim and perpetrator, the ripple effects of trauma, and the insidious ways in which societal pressures can fracture the human psyche. The deeper he delved into Silas's past, the more he found himself confronting the mirror of his own experiences. Silas's file, a fragmented collage of neglect and abuse, became a haunting reflection of his own battles with cynicism and disillusionment. He saw in Silas's story a shared vulnerability, a shared understanding of the weight of expectations, the crushing burden of trauma, and the surprising resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. Silas wasn't just a criminal, he was a product of a broken system, a testament to the devastating consequences of societal failures. His colleagues, initially skeptical of his obsessive pursuit of Silas, had finally come to understand the case's significance. It wasn't just about apprehending an escapee, it was about acknowledging the profound systemic flaws that allowed such a situation to occur. The investigation sparked a crucial conversation about institutional reform, improved treatment for the mentally ill, and the need for greater empathy and understanding within the system. Even the most hardened detectives had been forced to confront their own biases and acknowledge the inherent limitations of the judicial system in dealing with complex cases involving mental illness. But the most pressing questions remained unanswered. Where was Silas? What were his ultimate goals? Had his escape been a carefully orchestrated act of rebellion, or simply a desperate attempt at survival? The lack of a definitive answer gnawed at Davies, leaving him with a lingering sense of unease. The official closure offered no solace, only the unsettling realization that the truth remained elusive, obscured by the fog of unanswered questions. The case had ended, but the investigation, the internal reckoning, had only just begun. The city lights blurred into a hazy watercolor outside his window. The rain continued its relentless drumming, a rhythm echoing the persistent thrum of unease that still resonated within him. He couldn't shake the image of Silas's eyes, haunted and intelligent, eyes that reflected a profound understanding of both the darkness within himself and the darkness of the world he inhabited. Had Silas found freedom in his escape, or simply found another form of confinement? The question hung in the air, a silent accusation. The haunting memories of the Nutt House, the faces of the inmates, their stories whispered in the shadows, replayed in his mind. He'd become intimately familiar with their struggles, their vulnerabilities, their desperate pleas for help that often went unheard, unseen, and unacknowledged. The institution, a microcosm of society itself, had revealed the stark realities of institutional failure, societal neglect, and the devastating impact of mental illness. It exposed the hypocrisy of a system that claimed to heal but often inflicted more damage. Davies had expected closure, the satisfaction of a solved case, the justice of apprehending the guilty. Instead, he found himself grappling with the complexities of human nature, the inherent ambiguities of justice, and the enduring power of the human spirit to endure even in the face of overwhelming adversity. He found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about sanity, madness, and the very nature of reality. He'd wrestled with his own demons, his own preconceived notions about good and evil, and had emerged changed, scarred but somehow stronger, more resolute. He'd seen the abyss, stared into the darkness, and lived to tell the tale. He was no longer the cynical, jaded detective he'd once been. The Nutt House had stripped away his illusions, his preconceived notions, and had replaced them with a hard-won empathy, a deeper understanding of the human condition, and a profound sense of responsibility towards those who had been forgotten, neglected, and abandoned by a system that had failed them. He was forever marked by his experience, haunted by the memories, yet strengthened by the lessons learned. The lingering questions remained, a constant reminder of the unfinished business, but they no longer haunted him, they drove him. The case had ended, but his journey had only just begun. He carried the weight of unanswered questions, the burden of the unresolved, but he carried it with a newfound sense of purpose, a quiet determination to make a difference. He'd found a different kind of justice, not in the capture of Silas, but in the acknowledgement of the systemic failings that had created him, in the advocacy for reform, in the fight for a better, more compassionate world. The rain continued to fall, washing away the dust of the past, leaving behind a quiet resolve, a steadfast commitment to justice, even in its most elusive form. The echoes of the Nutt House would remain, but they would no longer define him. They would guide him, a constant reminder of the darkness that exists within us all, and the enduring power of the human spirit to survive, to overcome, and ultimately to thrive. The quiet strength that filled him was a testament to his journey, a silent promise to continue fighting for a world where even those lost in the shadows might find a glimmer of hope, a chance at redemption. The case was closed, but the fight for justice, for understanding, for a world where such horrors might one day be consigned to the past, was far from over. The lingering questions were not marks of failure, but catalysts for change, a beacon guiding him forward into an uncertain but hopeful future. The rain continued to fall, a cleansing rain, washing away the darkness, leaving behind the promise of a new dawn. Chapter 6. Echoes of Madness. The rusted gates of the Nutt House creaked shut behind Davies, the sound a final, metallic sigh marking the official end of the investigation. Yet, the silence that followed felt far louder, a void echoing with the unspoken traumas and lingering questions. He left the institution a changed man, the sterile scent of antiseptic forever clinging to the edges of his memory. The Nutt House wasn't just a place, it was a state of mind, a chilling reflection of societal failures etched onto his soul. But the story didn't end with Silas's escape. It continued, rippling outwards, affecting the lives of those left behind, the other patients, the staff, the families touched by the institution's dark shadow. The escape had shattered the fragile equilibrium, leaving a vacuum of uncertainty and fear. Agnes, the woman who'd communicated with Silas through coded messages hidden in her meticulously folded origami cranes, was now withdrawn, her creations now smaller, more hesitant, their vibrant colors muted. The escape had shaken her fragile world, threatening to unravel the carefully constructed coping mechanisms she'd painstakingly built. Davies found her sitting alone in the recreation room, a single, unfinished crane clutched in her trembling hand. Her eyes, once bright with a strange, calculated intelligence, now held a hollow emptiness. The silence between them was thick with unspoken fears. The escape had taken something precious from her, the sense of control, the subtle connection she'd shared with Silas, a bond born of shared isolation and a strange, twisted understanding. The vibrant origami that once held the hopes and anxieties of a fractured mind now lay inert, mere scraps of paper, a stark testament to the fragility of the human spirit in the face of disruption. Then there was Mr. Finch, the gentle giant whose booming laughter had once filled the corridors. Now, he was a shadow of his former self, his jovial demeanor replaced by an unnerving quietude. Silas's escape had triggered a relapse, his carefully constructed reality collapsing under the weight of the unsettling events. He spent his days staring blankly out the window, his hands perpetually clasped together, a silent prayer for the return of his lost serenity. The lively tap-dancing routines he had perfected were no more. He had become a silent, shuffling figure, a ghost haunting the halls, his eyes reflecting the echoes of his lost confidence and peace. Even the staff bore the scars of Silas's escape. Dr. Albright, the head psychiatrist, a man who'd prided himself on his clinical detachment, now carried a palpable tension in his shoulders. The escape had exposed the shortcomings of his methods, a stark reminder of his limitations in the face of profound mental illness. He'd lost some of his professional confidence, a chilling reality in which the line between his sanity and the world of the disturbed seemed to increasingly blur with each passing day. The escape was a constant, unspoken reproach, and the pressure of the public enquiry weighed heavily upon his weary shoulders. He now seemed more haunted than those he tended to, his nights plagued with images of Silas's escape. The remaining patients were affected as well. The fragile ecosystem of the Nutt House had been disturbed, creating a ripple effect of anxiety and fear. The daily routines, once a source of comfort and predictability, were now viewed with suspicion, each interaction shadowed by the ever-present threat of disruption. Paranoia crept into the corners of the institution, feeding on the uncertainty and the lingering anxiety. It was a haunting atmosphere, steeped in shadows and fraught with subtle tension. But amidst the darkness, there were glimmers of resilience, surprising sparks of hope. The patients, accustomed to navigating the treacherous landscape of their own minds, demonstrated an unexpected strength, finding comfort in each other's presence, and drawing strength from their shared experiences. A sense of camaraderie, almost a solidarity, bloomed amidst the chaos. They started spending their time talking, sharing stories, drawing comfort from each other's company. The nurses, who had initially been shaken by Silas's escape, also demonstrated remarkable resilience. They created a support group, helping each other cope with the emotional aftermath. The events surrounding Silas's escape became a catalyst for change. The Nutt House administration, pressured by public scrutiny and internal reckoning, initiated reforms. The staff underwent extensive retraining, focusing on improved crisis management and patient empathy. The institution, while still a place of confinement, slowly began to morph into an environment that was, at least in theory, more focused on healing and rehabilitation. New therapeutic programs were introduced, designed to address the underlying trauma that contributed to the patient's mental illnesses. The escape had exposed the deep-seated flaws of the system, but it had also sparked a conversation, a much-needed dialogue about the treatment of the mentally ill. It forced the community to confront the complexities of mental illness and the societal biases that often marginalized and neglected those struggling with severe mental health issues. The local community organized fundraising events to support the institution and to help provide better resources for mental health services. Davies, despite the official closure of the case, continued his informal investigation, not as a detective driven by the need to apprehend a fugitive, but as a man compelled by a growing understanding of the human condition. He'd seen the darkness, the fragility, the resilience of the human spirit. He'd seen the cracks in the system, and he was determined to help mend them, one patient, one reform, one conversation at a time. He found his own kind of closure not in Silas's capture, but in the quiet acts of advocacy, in the small victories of reform and in the ongoing support he provided the community. The echoes of madness remained, but they were now accompanied by the sound of hope, a faint but persistent whisper of change, promising a future where the Nutt House wouldn't be a symbol of societal failure, but a testament to the power of healing, resilience, and hope. The rain continued to fall outside his window, a constant reminder of the cleansing power of time, and the unwavering promise of a new dawn. The rain lashed against the windows of Davies' small apartment, mirroring the tempestuous emotions still churning within him. The official closure of the Silas case hadn't brought the peace he'd anticipated. The Nutt House, with its echoing corridors and the lingering scent of antiseptic, continued to haunt his dreams. He found himself replaying conversations, scrutinizing details he'd overlooked, searching for answers that remained elusive. The escape hadn't just been a police case, it had been a descent into the darkest corners of the human psyche, leaving indelible marks on everyone involved. Agnes, for instance, had become a recluse. Her vibrant origami, once a window into her complex mind, were now infrequent, fragile things, their colors muted, their folds less precise. The vibrant reds and oranges had given way to a pale, almost sickly yellow and white. Davies visited her several times, finding her hunched over a tiny, unfinished crane, her fingers trembling, her eyes vacant. He tried to engage her in conversation, offering gentle words of encouragement, but her responses were monosyllabic, her gaze fixed on the incomplete bird in her hand. The escape had severed the peculiar bond she'd forged with Silas, a connection born out of their shared isolation, a perverse kind of companionship in the face of madness. The loss of that connection seemed to have stripped away a crucial layer of her coping mechanism, leaving her vulnerable, adrift in a sea of silent despair. He noticed a distinct shift in her creations. The intricate folds that once spoke of a hidden intelligence now felt clumsy, almost desperate. It was as if the very act of creating had become a struggle, a painful reminder of the connection lost. Her hands, usually nimble and swift, moved with a hesitant slowness, each fold a painstaking effort, reflecting the shattered state of her inner world. Mr. Finch, the gentle giant with a heart of gold, was a different case altogether. His booming laughter, once a balm to the tense atmosphere of the ward, had vanished, replaced by a profound, unsettling silence. Silas's escape had triggered a severe relapse. His carefully constructed reality, a world built on routines and rituals, had crumbled. The tap-dancing shoes, once polished to a gleaming shine, lay abandoned in a corner of his room, dust settling on the worn leather. He now spent his days staring out the window, his massive frame hunched over, his hands clasped tightly together as if in perpetual prayer. He barely responded to anyone, his eyes holding a dull, vacant stare, reflecting the echoes of a shattered confidence. The nurses reported that he occasionally mumbled Silas's name in his sleep, his voice a low, heartbroken whisper. The vibrancy that had once defined him had been extinguished, leaving behind a hollow shell, a haunting reminder of the fragility of the human psyche. The lively tap dancing, a source of joy and therapy, had become a painful memory, a distant dream. His once gleaming shoes now symbolized the loss of his cheerful disposition and his rhythmic dance, a silent testament to his shattered world. Even Dr. Albright, the seemingly unflappable head psychiatrist, bore the invisible scars of the escape. The incident had shaken his professional confidence. The meticulous planning, the escape itself, and the subsequent media attention challenged his sense of control and competence. The public enquiry, with its probing questions and critical assessments, had cast a long shadow over his career. He seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders, his eyes shadowed with worry. The clinical detachment he once prided himself on had eroded, replaced by a palpable sense of unease and self-doubt. He started making more frequent visits to the local pub after work, a desperate attempt to escape the suffocating weight of his responsibilities. His usual sharp wit had faded, replaced by an unsettling silence. He found himself haunted by Silas's escape, the memory replaying in his mind with each passing night. The clear lines separating sanity and madness that he had once believed to exist seemed to blur, and he started feeling increasingly isolated, more aware of the depths of human suffering and the limitations of his profession. The escape had cast a long shadow over the remaining patients. The Nutt House, once a place of predictable routines, became a breeding ground for anxiety and suspicion. The patients, already navigating the treacherous landscapes of their own minds, now faced a new layer of uncertainty. Paranoia crept into the corners of the institution, feeding on the fear and isolation. Even the simplest interactions were fraught with tension, shadowed by the ever-present threat of another escape, another breach in the fragile order. However, amidst the darkness, there were unexpected glimmers of resilience. The patients, drawn together by their shared trauma, found comfort in each other's presence. A fragile sense of camaraderie bloomed, a solidarity born out of shared suffering. They began sharing stories, offering each other support, finding solace in their collective experience. The nurses, shaken but not broken by Silas's escape, created a support group for themselves, a space where they could process their emotions and find strength in their shared experiences. They started working together more closely, sharing responsibilities and ensuring each patient received the proper attention. Silas's escape became an unexpected catalyst for change. The Nutt House administration, facing mounting pressure from the public and the media, initiated significant reforms. New therapeutic programs were introduced, emphasizing patient empathy and improved crisis management. The staff underwent extensive retraining, focusing on de-escalation techniques and trauma-informed care. The institution, while still a place of confinement, slowly began to shed its reputation as a grim asylum, gradually transforming into a space that, at least in theory, prioritized healing and rehabilitation. The incident sparked a much-needed conversation about mental health and societal attitudes towards the mentally ill. The community rallied around the Nutt House, organizing fundraising events and offering support to the staff and patients. The escape, though deeply disturbing, became a wake-up call, forcing society to confront the challenges of mental illness and the urgent need for better resources and support systems. Davies, though the official case was closed, continued his informal investigation. He was no longer driven by the need to apprehend a fugitive but by a deeper understanding of the human condition. He'd witnessed the darkness, the fragility, and the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit. He saw the cracks in the system, and he was determined to help mend them, one patient, one conversation, one reform at a time. He found his own kind of closure not in Silas's capture, but in the quiet acts of advocacy, in the small victories of reform, in the ongoing support he provided to the community. The echoes of madness remained, a haunting reminder of the chaos that had unfolded within the walls of the Nutt House, but alongside them was the persistent whisper of hope, a testament to the indomitable human spirit's capacity for resilience and healing. The rain outside his window continued to fall, a constant, gentle rhythm accompanying the quiet promise of a new dawn. The quiet hum of the refrigerator was the most prominent sound in Agnes's apartment, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the Nutt House that still echoed in Davies' memory. He sat across from her, a half-finished cup of tea growing cold beside a stack of her latest origami creations, cranes, mostly, but with a noticeable difference. The sickly yellow and white had retreated slightly, a hesitant blush of pink had begun to creep into the wings of some, a faint, almost tentative return of color. Agnes herself remained withdrawn, but there was a subtle shift in her demeanor. Her gaze, while still distant, occasionally flickered towards the window, a fleeting connection to the outside world. She didn't speak much, but her silence felt less oppressive now, less a wall and more a quiet contemplation. Davies noticed she was working on a larger piece, a complex swan, its graceful curves demanding intricate folds. It was a slow, painstaking process, but the deliberate nature of her work suggested a renewed focus, a reclaiming of her artistry, a quiet rebellion against the lingering shadows of Silas's escape. He'd learned that silence could be a form of healing, a necessary retreat before the resurgence of creativity. Mr. Finch, however, remained a heartbreaking enigma. His silence was absolute, a void that swallowed the vibrant energy he once possessed. Davies found him sitting by the window, as usual, but this time, his hands weren't clasped tightly. One hand rested gently on the worn, dusty tap dancing shoes, a faint tremor running through his fingers. It was a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it spoke volumes. A flicker of recognition seemed to ignite in his eyes when Davies entered the room, a brief connection before the fog returned. He didn't speak, but he didn't flinch away from Davies' presence either. It was a fragile breakthrough, a subtle hint that the chasm of silence might not be impassable after all. Davies brought him a worn copy of The Great Gatsby, a book Finch had once mentioned enjoying. He placed it gently beside him, then left him to the quiet companionship of words, a different kind of dance entirely. He knew progress wouldn't be linear, that setbacks were inevitable, but the subtle shifts in Finch's demeanor offered a sliver of hope, a whisper of resilience amidst the profound sadness. Dr. Albright, meanwhile, was attempting to rebuild his professional life and, more importantly, his personal equilibrium. The public enquiry had been brutal, but he'd survived it, his reputation tarnished but not destroyed. The constant self-doubt, however, remained a tenacious companion. Davies noticed a change in his approach. He was less focused on clinical diagnoses and more invested in fostering a genuine connection with his patients. He was still sharp, his mind as keen as ever, but there was a new empathy in his approach, a deeper understanding of the fragility of the human spirit. He started organizing staff retreats, not just for debriefing after crises, but to cultivate teamwork and mutual support. The change wasn't radical, but it was palpable, a quiet revolution fueled by the shared experience of Silas's escape and its aftermath. The local pub remained a sanctuary, but the heavy silences were punctuated by occasional laughter, a sign of a slowly healing heart. The Nutt House itself had undergone a remarkable transformation. The imposing walls still stood, but the atmosphere had shifted. The heavy scent of antiseptic had lessened, replaced by the subtle fragrance of lavender and chamomile. New art therapy programs were underway. The once stark walls were now adorned with patient artwork, vibrant paintings, intricate sculptures, and surprisingly moving poetry. The previously sterile common rooms now had a comfortable, homely feel, furnished with cozy armchairs and warm lighting. There was still an underlying tension, a palpable reminder of the fragility of the mental state, but the overall atmosphere was one of healing and hope. The administration's initial response to the crisis had been defensive, but they had learned to be reactive rather than proactive. They understood that their previous approach had been flawed, and they were committed to changing it, hoping to create an environment focused on fostering hope. The changes weren't merely cosmetic. New staff training programs focused on de-escalation techniques, trauma-informed care, and patient empathy. The nurses, initially shaken, had become more resilient, more perceptive, and more attuned to the subtle cues of their patients. They formed a cohesive unit, supporting each other and working together to create a safer, more supportive environment. The patients, too, showed remarkable resilience. They had established a peer support group, a place where they could share their struggles, offer each other encouragement, and find comfort in shared experience. Silas's escape, despite the trauma it had caused, had paradoxically brought them closer, creating an unexpected sense of camaraderie. The support group sessions offered them a safe space to express their emotions, heal their trauma, and to discuss effective coping mechanisms. The community's response to the escape had also been transformative. The initial fear and condemnation gave way to understanding and support. The local newspaper had run a series of articles highlighting the challenges of mental health and the need for better resources. Local businesses and organizations had rallied around the Nutt House, raising funds for new programs and offering volunteering opportunities. The escape, although traumatic, had unexpectedly fostered a sense of community and collective responsibility. The local community groups had begun to offer support to the patients as well as the staff, which made a significant difference in the overall environment within the Nutt House. The community outreach programs provided opportunities for social interaction, leading to increased confidence and self-esteem. Davies continued his informal visits, not as an investigator, but as a friend, a listener, an advocate. He found a profound satisfaction in witnessing the small victories, the subtle shifts in the patient's attitudes, the gradual rebuilding of lives shattered by trauma and madness. He saw the impact of the reforms, the improved patient care, and the growing sense of hope within the institution. He participated in community forums and worked alongside mental health advocates to promote greater awareness and understanding of mental health challenges. He found his own kind of closure not in the capture of a fugitive, but in the quiet acts of healing, rehabilitation, and advocacy. The echoes of madness still lingered, the haunting memories of Silas's escape, the lingering scars on the patients and staff, but they were slowly being overshadowed by the sounds of recovery, resilience, and hope. The rain had stopped, and a pale sun broke through the clouds, casting a gentle glow on the world outside Davies's window, a reflection of the quiet, persistent light of hope that had begun to illuminate the lives of those within the Nutt House and those who cared for them. The new normal was still fragile, still uncertain, but it was undeniably a step towards a brighter future, a future where the echoes of madness could be gradually replaced by the whispers of healing and the promise of a new dawn. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind a world washed clean, or so it seemed. But the cleansing rain hadn't touched the lingering grime of Silas's escape, the moral ambiguities that clung to the aftermath like a persistent odor. The Nutt House, outwardly transformed, still held secrets within its walls, secrets that whispered of justice delayed, perhaps not denied, but certainly deferred. Dr. Albright, despite his professional rehabilitation, remained haunted by the ghost of Silas. The inquiry had exonerated him, but the gnawing self-doubt persisted. He'd implemented reforms, fostered a more humane environment, but the weight of responsibility for Silas's actions still pressed upon him. He found himself staring at the newly vibrant artwork in the common room, the cheerful colors a stark contrast to the darkness that still lurked in the corners of his mind. He'd pored over Silas's file countless times, searching for a clue, a missed sign, anything that might have predicted the escape. He found nothing, only a chilling reminder of the unpredictable nature of the human psyche, a testament to the limitations of even the most advanced psychiatric care. The legal system, he mused, often dealt in absolutes, in black and white, while the reality of mental illness painted in 1,000 shades of gray. Silas's escape had exposed the cracks in that system, the flaws in their approach, the limitations of their understanding. Agnes, meanwhile, had found a fragile piece in her art. The vibrant pink hues in her origami creations were more than just a return of color. They were a testament to her resilience, a rebellion against the trauma she'd endured. But the lingering fear was still present, a subtle tremor in her hands as she folded the delicate paper. She hadn't forgotten Silas, nor the terror he'd inflicted. Justice, in her eyes, wasn't solely about incarceration. It was about accountability, about acknowledging the harm done, about the scars left behind. And those scars, she knew, would take time to heal. She had sought therapy, and discovered a surprising sense of kinship with the other patients, all united by their shared experience. They exchanged stories of recovery, both celebrating progress and acknowledging the ongoing struggles of rehabilitation. They had formed a mutual support group, helping each other navigate through the challenges of day-to-day living after their traumatizing encounter with Silas. Mr. Finch's quiet breakthrough felt similarly precarious. The faint tremor in his fingers as he touched his tap shoes, the fleeting flicker of recognition in his eyes, these were small victories in the battle against his profound silence. But his progress was fragile, easily disrupted by the shadows of his past. Davies had continued his visits, offering companionship and gentle encouragement. He read to Finch, sharing stories and narratives, creating a sanctuary of shared experience. He knew that the healing process would be lengthy, a slow dance back from the abyss. He also knew that a simple act of kindness could make a monumental difference in Mr. Finch's journey to recovery. He understood the importance of companionship and gentle encouragement, offering a quiet companionship, a shared silence that didn't feel oppressive. The book, The Great Gatsby, lay untouched beside him. The words remained unread, but the gesture, the offer of connection, held a subtle power. The community, too, grappled with the aftermath. The initial fear had subsided, replaced by a mixture of concern and a growing understanding of the complexities of mental illness. The local newspaper continued to run articles, focusing on the need for better mental health resources, highlighting the importance of community support. The fundraisers had raised enough to establish a dedicated mental health outreach program, aiming to provide support to those struggling with similar issues within the wider community. The escape, while traumatic, had become a catalyst for change, for increased awareness and a greater willingness to confront the societal stigma surrounding mental illness. But the legal ramifications remained unresolved. Silas's escape had exposed weaknesses not just within the Nutt House, but within the entire system of justice. The police investigation, while concluding with Silas's apprehension, had raised more questions than it answered. The investigation unearthed a network of corruption within the institution, a web of alliances and betrayals, revealing questionable practices and a systemic disregard for patient welfare. There was a palpable sense of injustice lingering in the air, which permeated the conversations and actions of many individuals directly involved and affected by Silas's escape. The authorities, facing potential lawsuits from families of both patients and staff, were forced to address systemic problems within the institution. This led to a major restructuring and internal overhaul of the system, which included the implementation of new policies and procedures to prevent similar incidents in the future. This included new security measures and a more comprehensive staff training program. The legal battles were slow, arduous, and expensive, but they had brought to light the pervasive issues of neglect and corruption that had long plagued the institution. Davies, though no longer directly involved in the investigation, found himself a reluctant witness to this slow unfolding of justice. He saw the impact of the lawsuits, the changes implemented within the Nutt House, and the gradual improvements in patient care. He witnessed the slow grinding of the legal wheels, the careful weighing of evidence, the complexities of navigating legal systems. The long and arduous legal proceedings had made some people more aware of the systemic issues, leading to significant improvements in the handling of mental health services. The legal battle had led to a wider conversation about accountability and responsibility regarding the well-being of those under institutional care. He understood the concept of justice delayed, not denied, but also acknowledged that delayed justice could sometimes feel like an absence of justice. He found himself pondering the ethical dilemmas, the blurry lines between right and wrong, the moral gray areas that defined the lives of the patients, the staff, and even himself. Silas's actions, though reprehensible, were rooted in a complex web of mental illness and past trauma. Holding him accountable was necessary, but it wasn't enough. The true justice, Davies realized, lay not just in punishing Silas but in addressing the systemic failures that had enabled his escape, in preventing such incidents from happening again, and in fostering a system of care that genuinely prioritized the well-being of its most vulnerable members. The echoes of madness still lingered, a haunting reminder of the fragility of the human psyche and the limitations of the systems designed to contain and care for it. But amidst the echoes, a new melody was emerging, a melody of hope, resilience, and a quiet, persistent pursuit of justice, a justice that sought not only retribution but also healing, reform, and a brighter future for all those affected by the events at the Nutt House. The sun had fully emerged now, casting long shadows across the grounds, a symbolic representation of the long road ahead, a journey towards a more just and compassionate world. The quiet hum of the fluorescent lights in Davies' small apartment seemed to amplify the silence, a silence that was heavier now, laden with the weight of unresolved questions and lingering anxieties. The Nutt House, once a place of chaos and terror, was now a site of ongoing reconstruction, both physical and metaphorical. The freshly painted walls, the refurbished common rooms, and the newly implemented security measures were all visible signs of a concerted effort to rebuild, to heal, to move forward. Yet, beneath the surface, the echoes of Silas's madness still resonated, a persistent reminder of the fragility of the human psyche and the limitations of even the most well-intentioned systems of care. He picked up a worn copy of Crime and Punishment, the pages dog-eared and marked with his annotations. He'd reread Dostoevsky countless times, finding a strange resonance with the novel's exploration of guilt, madness, and the complexities of the human spirit. Silas, he thought, was a Raskolnikov in his own way, a man driven by a darkness he couldn't fully comprehend, a darkness that had ultimately consumed him. But unlike Raskolnikov, Silas hadn't found redemption in confession or self-imposed suffering. His escape, his acts of violence, were not driven by philosophical ideals but by a chaotic brew of mental illness, trauma, and a desperate yearning for a freedom he couldn't define. The legal battles continued to drag on, a slow, agonizing process that exposed the deep-seated flaws within the system. Lawyers argued over technicalities, psychiatrists debated the nature of Silas's illness, and the families of the victims struggled to find solace in a system that often felt indifferent to their pain. The revelations unearthed during the investigations were chilling: systemic neglect, corruption within the institution, and a profound lack of accountability. The Nutt House, it turned out, was not an isolated case. It was a microcosm of larger societal failures, a stark reflection of our collective inability to adequately address the needs of those struggling with mental illness. Davies found himself haunted by the faces of the patients, their stories weaving a tapestry of pain, resilience, and unexpected hope. Agnes, with her vibrant origami creations, had found a path to healing through art. Her art wasn't just a form of self-expression, it was a powerful act of defiance against the trauma she'd endured. Her hands, once trembling with fear, now moved with a quiet grace, transforming simple sheets of paper into intricate works of art. Her progress was a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit, a symbol of hope amidst the darkness. Mr. Finch's journey was equally poignant. The tap shoes, once symbols of his lost identity, were now tools of his slow, painstaking recovery. The gentle encouragement of Davies, the shared silences, the simple act of reading aloud, these seemingly small gestures had woven a fragile tapestry of connection, helping to mend the shattered fragments of his psyche. His progress was fragile, a slow and painstaking process, but it was progress nonetheless. It was a testament to the power of human connection, to the importance of compassion in the face of profound suffering. His story underscored the necessity of empathy in approaching those suffering from severe mental illness. The community, too, had undergone a transformation. The initial fear and suspicion had gradually given way to a growing understanding of the complexities of mental illness. The local newspaper, once focused on the sensational aspects of Silas's escape, now published thoughtful articles on mental health awareness, advocating for better resources and increased societal support. The community fundraisers had been a success, exceeding their goals, resulting in the establishment of a dedicated mental health outreach program, making mental health care more accessible and affordable to the wider community. Silas's escape, despite its horrific consequences, had ironically become a catalyst for change, a spark that had ignited a wider conversation about mental health. The final chapter, Davies reflected, wasn't about a neatly tied-up resolution or a satisfying sense of closure. It was about the enduring power of madness, the fragility of sanity, and the complex interplay between mental illness, the criminal justice system, and the human condition. The reader is left with a lingering sense of unease, a recognition that the echoes of Silas's madness would continue to reverberate long after his capture. The ending, Davies realized, wasn't about answers, it was about questions. What does it mean to be truly sane in a world riddled with madness? What responsibility do we bear for those who fall through the cracks of our systems of care? How do we balance the need for justice with the imperative of compassion? These questions, he knew, would continue to haunt him, and perhaps, they were meant to haunt the reader as well. The lingering ambiguity, the absence of a clear-cut resolution, was intentional. It was a reflection of the messy, unpredictable nature of life itself, a reminder that the human psyche, with its infinite complexities, remains an enigma, a source of both profound beauty and terrifying darkness. The book closes, not with a bang, but with a whisper. A whisper of unresolved questions, of lingering anxieties, and of the enduring power of madness. The reader is left to grapple with the implications of the narrative, to ponder the complex interplay of forces that shape the lives of the characters, and to confront the unsettling truth that sanity and madness often reside on a knife's edge, separated only by the thinnest of veils. The final image lingers, the setting sun casting long shadows across the grounds of the Nutt House, a poignant reminder of the long road ahead, a journey towards a more just and compassionate world, but a journey that is far from over. The echoes of madness, subtle but persistent, serve as a potent reminder that the struggle for understanding, for justice, and for healing is an ongoing process, one that demands our constant attention and unwavering commitment. The true justice, it seems, lies not in the courtroom but in the ongoing effort to reform, to heal, and to prevent future tragedies. The story concludes not with a triumph over madness, but with a recognition of its enduring presence, a constant reminder of the human spirit's resilience and vulnerability in the face of unrelenting darkness. The ending is unsettling, yet, in its unsettling nature, lies a powerful truth. The fight for mental health care and justice is a continual struggle, fraught with complexities and demanding unwavering commitment from every sector. Back matter. First and foremost, my deepest gratitude goes to the countless individuals who have dedicated their lives to working within the mental health system. Your unwavering commitment, often in the face of overwhelming challenges, is a testament to the human spirit's resilience and compassion. This book is, in many ways, a tribute to your tireless efforts. I am also indebted to the insightful contributions of Dr. Eleanor Vance, whose expertise in forensic psychology provided invaluable guidance and helped me to navigate the complex ethical considerations inherent in exploring the darker aspects of mental illness. Special thanks also to my editor, Martha, the Hammer, Hammerton, for her relentless pursuit of clarity and her uncanny ability to find the humor even in the darkest corners of my manuscript. Finally, to my family and friends, thank you for enduring my nocturnal writing habits, the erratic mood swings, and the endless stream of unsettling anecdotes. Your patience and support have been invaluable. Delusion, a false belief strongly held despite evidence to the contrary. Often a symptom of severe mental illness, and a particular favorite amongst the patients of the Nutt House. Dissociation, a mental process that involves separating oneself from one's thoughts, feelings, or experiences. Think of it as the ultimate escape route. Hallucination, a perception of something that is not actually present. A common occurrence, and, let's be honest, sometimes quite imaginative. Sociopathy, a personality disorder characterized by a lack of empathy, remorse, and disregard for social norms. Our favorite kind of patient. Gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation where a person is made to question their own sanity. A crucial tool in the power dynamics within the Nutt House. The Nutt House.